Her Russian Millionaire by Scarlett Malam. A romancely.com story.
Chapter 1. When the great lumbering beast of a bus hissed to a halt, the population of Los Angeles, the city of angels, grew by 2. Jaleesa and Nikita Jones entered the city like so many others did. Little money, no work, and no place to go. A hope for a better life rested upon their prayer-pressed hands and bowed heads. They knew God would provide for them, but it was hard not to feel afraid. The two walked the streets, looking for any help they could find. Squat little gray buildings sat on either side of the road, beaconing in customers with illuminated signs. Alleyways stretched into a darkness that made Jaleesa walk faster, as if a monster would emerge and grab them. The stench of alcohol and vomit hung in the air. Homeless men slumped over and mumbling to themselves wandered too close for comfort. The sound of their feet on the concrete seemed to go on for miles. Spare anything? A shriveled-up pale hand reached a can out toward Nikita. Jaleesa clutched her little sister closer to her. The elderly man wasn't a threat to them, but the action was instinctual. "I would give it to you if I had it," Jaleesa answered honestly. It was her personal belief that people were put on this earth to spread love through the name of Christ, and part of that was helping the needy. However, the sisters were in a desperate situation, and they could not spare anything. "All right," he retracted his hand. His eyes showed that he faced rejection hundreds of times a day. "I will pray for you," Nikita spoke up, her sweet voice creating a little melody in the air. "Pray for us all," the man grunted, turning away. Jaleesa pulled on her sister's hand, and the two girls shared a moment. Nikita smiled at her sister, dimples shining on her face, but her wide, dark eyes held a touch of fear that Jaleesa could not ignore. Jaleesa reached out with her free hand and pinched at her sister's cheek. It was a familiar gesture, one their late father used to do all the time. Nikita visibly relaxed, and the two girls continued down the street. The chill of fall bit through their thin clothing and into their bones. The only warmth they felt was from their intertwined hands. Jaleesa squeezed her younger sister tightly, feeling every tremble of the smaller girl's shoulders. She did not let go for a second. There was no earthly force that could separate them. The death of their father had only strengthened Jaleesa's will to keep her sister by her side. Their mother had been out of the picture for a decade when their father was diagnosed with aggressive, late-stage stomach cancer. The doctors tried everything to save him, but ultimately, it was deemed fatal. Seeing him take his final breath was a shock that made Jaleesa prioritize family and faith over everything. Her father was a good man, active and well-respected in the community and in the church. He was often found with a smile on his face, cracking jokes and lighting up the room. There wasn't a person on this earth who he couldn't be friends with. Jaleesa knew that it was his loving demeanor and his devotion to the Lord that helped her learn to be a strong, godly woman and a loving person. Jaleesa could still remember the way his eyes stared aimlessly at the ceiling as his body began to fail him. His skin slowly turned from a soft brown to a sickly blue. The color combined with the stiffness of his body made it seem for all the world like he had been dipped in wax. The scent of hospital cleaners, the steady beeping of machines, soft sobs coming from both her and her sister, murmured prayers. The feeling of a soul passing through the gates of heaven was an incredible one. It forced the air right out of the room and left both the girls and the nurses surrounding him speechless. Jaleesa had felt a rush of relief upon knowing that God had her father in his arms. She had wanted more time with her father, but nothing in the world was worth more than knowing he was in a better place. After his passing, the girls went to the house which no longer felt like a home. It was an empty shell of what it once was without his presence. Jaleesa ran her fingers over everything that was his books on the shelf, his laundry in the basket, his image in the family photos hanging on the wall. It was as if he could walk in at any moment, smiling and laughing about something funny one of his Meals on Wheels recipients said. The two girls had prayed over the phone before Jaleesa began to make calls. Her grandmother was far too old to care for herself, let alone two girls. Her aunt was a mess, parading men in and out of her home. Her uncle had married a woman in England, and they lived there now. Members of the church were sad to hear about his passing and offered casseroles and a shoulder to cry on. They didn't need casseroles. They needed somewhere to go. The bank wouldn't let them live in their house rent-free, and Jalisa had just finished high school. She had no job, and even if she did get one, they would pay her minimum wage. There was no way she would be able to keep her and sister afloat. Housing, food, clothing, water, electric, phone. That was not even counting Nikita's school supplies and their father's medical bills, which would be shoved down their throats before he was even in the ground. The two girls had fished out the number for the child services worker who told them to call her when their father died. She gave them a generic sentiment of sympathy and said she would drop by between 5 and 7 to figure this all out. Jalisa had turned and assured Nikita that child services would help them, that they would be okay. She felt like a fool now when she remembered it. The government was cruel and did not care about two black girls in the middle of Ohio. They were two numbers on a list. The case of Jones, Jalisa, and Jones, Nikita. 114 and 118. Dead father. No mother. Split them up and move on to the next case. Your mother can't be found, the woman had said, her thin mouth pressing into a tight line. You have no other relatives that are suitable. What's she saying? Nikita had turned to her sister with a look nothing short of horror. You'll go into foster care. You might have a tough time of it, but I'm sure a family will take you in soon. The woman had shown Nikita a smile so fake Jalisa had to look away. I have a family, Nikita pleaded. I have Jalisa. She will be going to Stanson Halfway House. When you dash, that's on the other side of Ohio. Nikita had not even let the woman finish. The woman took a deep breath and nodded her head. When Nikita gets out of the halfway house, she is free to apply for your adoption. Jalisa believed that lying was okay only for survival. She had agreed with the woman and listened to her drone on and on about how Jalisa would go about adopting her sister once she was out of the halfway house, all the while planning on taking Nikita and running. The next Sunday, the donation plate went around in honor of their father. The money would go to Jalisa and Nikita to help pay for his medical bills. They took it and ran, asking God for forgiveness for not using the money for the intended purpose. Jalisa paid for a one-way bus ticket for two to the farthest away city they could find, Los Angeles, California. The Department of Child Services would not follow them there. The sisters would have a new life with nothing to tear them apart. The two packed as light as they could. A few cans of food, toothbrush, blanket, Nikita's stuffed animal, Jalisa's diary, the rest of their cash, and their father's Bible. Around their necks, they wore the lockets their father had bought them for their baptism. They were hung on dainty golden chains with their initials in rhinestones on the front plate. Before they left, the two cut out a picture of their father and pressed it inside the locket. If worse came to worse, Jalisa would sell hers for food. Hey! Nikita pulled on her sister, bringing Jalisa back to the sidewalk. You almost walked past that one. Jalisa looked over at the store Nikita was pointing to. It was a gas station with 2 broken pumps and 4 working ones. Men dressed in ratty shirts lingered around the corner, smoke drifting from their lips. Jalisa didn't need to be close to know it probably wasn't cigarette smoke. I don't know, she said warily. Maybe one of the places that I put in an application at will hire me. I doubt it. Nikita frowned. You have no references. Even if you did, you couldn't give them out because the department might figure out where we are. You never know. Jalisa had spent most of the day filling out stacks of repetitive questions at every fast food restaurant, grocery store, and retail store they passed. Nikita pursed her lips, and Jalisa relented. They walked into the gas station, giving the men at the corner a wide space. Are you hiring? Jalisa asked the man behind the quick-stop gas station counter. He shook his head no. Please? I'll do anything. I'll work late nights or early mornings. No, the man said slowly. Jalisa turned away to see Nikita staring heavily at the food on display. Do you know of anywhere that is hiring? Jalisa asked. No. Now, are you going to pick something out or not? The man's angry voice made Jalisa shrink back into her skin. She quickly pulled Nikita out of the store before the devil tempted her into stealing any food. Holding back her tears, she went into the motel next to the quick stop. The front desk receptionist was friendly until Jaleesa asked her for an application. The woman practically threw it at her before huffing off to get the manager. Her looked over Jaleesa with a gaze that made her wish she had on something thicker than a red plaid shirt and jeans. Well, I can make an opening for you. He leered at Jaleesa's curvy figure and ample bosom. Not interested. Have a nice day. She crossed her arms over her chest as soon they stepped outside. Why did you say no? He had a job for you. Nikita turned on her sister, unwise in the ways of ungodly men. He wasn't asking me to be a maid. She swallowed hard. I'll leave it at that. I'll tell you more about it when you're older. Look, I really hate to say it, but let's just make a sign. Nikita propped her hand upon her hip. Jaleesa's pack hung on her like a sorrow. She was nervous. With each rejection, the pressure to have a success grew greater. It was becoming darker outside. The sky purpled, and the sun hung lazily in the clouds. As the oldest, she must provide for her sister. Okay, Jaleesa whispered, her shoulders sagging. She didn't want to beg, but that was probably their best option. The two picked a piece of the street and sat down. Jaleesa wrote on a page of her diary, homeless. Anything helps. Nikita held out a cup the two had plucked from the trash. People walked by them completely unfazed by the tragedy of the two homeless girls on the sidewalk. After about an hour, Nikita started sobbing. The only money the two had made was a nickel given by a passing homeless man with the same sign. The three prayed together for prosperity, and he went on his way. Nikita grabbed the coin out of the cup and held it between her fingers. It's getting cold, Nikita whispered, her chin quivering. The unspoken question hung in the cold air between them. Where are we going to go? We can't go to the motel we were just in. Jaleesa knew it probably had the lowest rates in town, but it was out of the question. We'll find another one. We can't. Nikita curled up next to her sister. Motels require money. We have some money left over from the bus ticket, yeah? We'll use that. Jaleesa put her diary away, and they set out in search of a cheap motel. Fat tears ran down Nikita's cheeks in a near-constant stream. The grief of their father plus the insecurity and fear of their situation was not something that a 14-year-old should have to deal with. Jaleesa had to look away, the feeling of failure becoming too much. Just as she was starting to wonder if the two should just hitch a ride back to Ohio, where at least Nikita would be warm and fed, when they found a motel with low rates. It was not a chain motel, but a family-owned local motel. The building was falling apart. Letters falling off of the sign made the name unreadable. Graffiti decorated the red brick sides. 4 cars were in the parking lot, one with the engine still running and the headlights on. A shiver worked its way up Jaleesa's spine. Over the years, she had learned that that was the Lord warning her of danger. I know it's not nice, Nikita said, but it's $50 a night. We'll think about it. Jaleesa tried to smile at her sister. She was desperate enough for Nikita to have a bed to sleep in that she would figure out how to make it safe, even if that meant staying up all night to watch over her. I'll count the money, Nikita said excitedly. Let's sit on the bench. The metal bench was even colder than the fall air. Jaleesa couldn't imagine what it would be like once night came. The temperature would plummet, and the more unsavory people would come out to play. God only knows what would happen to the girls if one of them found the two huddled in an alley. Nikita rifled through the bag and pulled out a wad of ones and coins. Jaleesa didn't have to count it to know it wasn't enough for a room. She bowed her head deeply in prayer and began to speak to God. God, I really need your help. I'm in this situation that I know I can't handle. I figured there would be hardships once we got to Los Angeles, Lord, but this is too much for me. I am but your humble servant, and there are many ungodly people here. The devil has pulled these people away from your light, and because of that, I cannot trust them. The devil may put it in their head to hurt another person. Yeah, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil. For you are with me, your rod and your staff, they comfort me. Jaleesa ended her prayer by reciting a verse. 24.75. Nikita shook her head, the money slipping from her fingers and back into her pack. Jaleesa lifted her head and looked over at Nikita. She started to say something before another voice interrupted. I like your backpack. A woman stood in front of them, gesturing to Nikita's pack. It was pastel pink with patches of baseballs ironed on. Do you play baseball? I play softball. Nikita turned her tear-stained face to the woman. The craft store didn't have any softballs. Oh, she paused. Are you okay? Jalisa and Nikita looked at each other, unsure of what to say. No didn't actually cover it. Jalisa turned to the woman, taking in her appearance. She was older, about 40, white, blonde, and slim. She wore too much blush, and her eyebrows were arched too high, but her eyes were kind. As of today, we're homeless, Jalisa admitted. Our father died a couple days ago, and we're out on our own. My goodness, she shook her head. Look at how little you have with you. Poor babies. Would you like some food? Yes. Nikita sat up straight and smiled for the first time in days. God bless you, Jalisa breathed. Any food you will give us is appreciated. Marie. The woman filled in Jalisa's trailing off. I'm Marie Kolovsky. Jalisa. She gestured to herself and then to Nikita. Nikita. The girls followed Marie to a diner about a mile away. The air inside was warm and thick with the smell of fry oil and cheeseburgers. A radio shaped like a jukebox played a pop song loudly. Posters of celebrities from the 50s covered the walls. Black and white tiles danced along the floor. It all felt very fake, but Jalisa was grateful that her sister would be getting food. Heyo, Marie. The man acting as host greeted Marie. The two embraced briefly, kissing each other loudly on both sides of the cheek. Who's your friends? Jalisa and Nikita, Marie said. Can we sit somewhere away from that blasted jukebox? Of course. He gathered up a few menus and led them to their seats. Ladies, you come here a lot? Jalisa asked while Nikita pored over the menu. Oh yes, I work just around the corner, Marie explained with a wave of her hand. Sometimes I get off my shift quite late, and this place is open 24/7. Where do you work? Jalisa asked, not even bothering to look at the menu. If it was anything like other diners, it was safest to just get the original burger and leave it at that. I work at this bar called the Semya. It is English letters for the Russian pronunciation of bar. Marie laughed. The owners couldn't think of anything better to call it? Nikita asked. Jalisa swatted her on the arm. Be nice to her. This woman is buying you food. Maybe she's friends with the owner, Jalisa scolded. Oh no, it's fine. Marie tossed her blonde hair back. I do know the owner, though. He's okay, I guess. Hey, Marie. A waitress came over and looked between the three. What's with the kid? I'm 14, Nikita defended herself. They're just some hungry folks looking for a meal. Marie smiled at the waitress, but it was strained. Aha, sure. You want the usual? She asked. Yes, Marie answered. They went around the table ordering their food. Jalisa mentally totaled up everything that she and her sister were eating. Nikita's eyes were bigger than her stomach, and she alone ordered $25 of a deep-fried mess. Jalisa planned on paying the woman back once she got a job and had a stable life. Do you have any openings at the, Semya? Jalisa asked. Semya. Marie said it with a throaty sound that Jalisa knew she would never be able to replicate perfectly. I think we have an opening, but you'd have to come in and see the owner. I can do that. Jalisa sent up a silent thank you to God. Marie might be God's way of answering her prayers. With someone on the inside vouching for her and who also knew her situation, she would have a good chance of getting the job. She could see the light at the end of the tunnel. Perfect. Marie smiled warmly at her. The plates and plates of food that the two starving girls ordered arrived along with Marie's chicken and lemon salad. Jalisa popped one of the hot fries into her mouth and savored the taste. It was simple diner food, but it was one of the first things she had eaten since running away. The two had packed canned food that wouldn't go bad and had gone through it during the 2 days the bus had taken to get to Los Angeles. They saved 1 can of ravioli for breakfast tomorrow. It was all they had. It took nearly an hour for Nikita and Jalisa to finish eating. They boxed up what little leftovers they had and stowed them away in Nikita's pack. Marie sipped her tea and made pleasant small talk with the girls. She paid the bill with a stack of cash, mostly small bills. "Tips," she explained. "I'm a bartender. I really hate to do this," Jalisa started as soon as the waitress had left for the last time. "But can I borrow some money? I fear for my sister if we have to sleep out on the street. We just got here, and I don't know where any of the homeless shelters are, and judging by the number of people out on the streets, it doesn't look like there even is a homeless shelter dash." "Jalisa," Marie giggled, cutting off Jalisa's stream of babble. "One step at a time, okay? Let's go see about getting you a job." The three departed and walked toward the Semia. Jalisa felt as though she was standing on a cliff. The fate of her and her sister rested upon the shoulders of the woman she just met and a stranger she was heading to meet. She just prayed they were kind. If you want more BWWM romances like this, please, my love, be sure to subscribe to the Romancely YouTube channel. I look forward to spending more time with you. Subscribe and let's make it happen.
Chapter 2. If you didn't know what you were looking for, the building was easy to miss. It was one of 100 brick buildings in Los Angeles, nothing special. 2 stories and a flat top were connected by a hazardous-looking fire escape. A neon green sign displaying the name of the bar blinked lazily at them. An alley full of trash and something moving around gave off an awful smell. Jalisa was not impressed. 2 drunk men stumbled out of the bar and into the street in front of them. They were attempting to yell at each other, but their speech was so slurred that it came out sounding like a monster screeching. They swung at the air near each other, missing the other man by a wide margin. Jalisa pulled Nikita close and said a silent prayer for the men as they stumbled closer and closer to the traffic on the road. "Don't mind them." Marie laughed, her kitten heels clicking along the sidewalk. "Should we call someone?" Nikita said. "Like the police? You think the cops care about 2 drunks trying to fight on the street? This is LA, baby, they got bigger things to worry about." Marie paused in front of the alley and watched the men for a second. "They might get hit by a car," Nikita whispered to Jalisa, her body shivering as the warmth from the diner wore off. "It's okay." Jalisa gave her a reassuring squeeze. "Jesus will take care of them. See? Look why there." Marie pointed her finger back to the men. One was now doubled over and vomiting profusely. The other appeared to be sleeping standing up and pressing his face against the cold brick wall. These drunks only got about 1 good minute of fight in them. After that, it's done. Marie gestured for the girls to follow her down the alley. Jalisa watched her be swallowed by the shadows and rushed to keep up while Nikita dug in her heels and had to be dragged. Jalisa understood that it was smelly and scary, but Marie might be able to save them from sleeping in an alleyway just like this. The 2 girls made their way through the darkness to the only point of light in the alley. A single light bulb with a metal net cover hung over the top of a door that displayed employees only. The door was a thick metal that was odd in comparison to the old wooden door at the front of the bar. A series of complicated locks lined the right side. "Just 1 second." Marie glanced over her shoulder before reaching into her purse and pulling out a roll of keys. There had to be at least 50 of them on the key ring, all painted brightly with different colors of nail polish. Jalisa had no clue why a bartender would need so many keys, but she kept her mouth shut. The locks clicked open, and the door squeaked on its hinges. Muffled music thumping in the distance played. The smell of smoke and alcohol rushed out like a fog. Nikita coughed a few times and covered her mouth with her shirt. Marie stepped into the doorway and motioned for the girls to come inside. It was not much brighter inside the back entrance. Jalisa tried to look around while Marie relocked the door, but she could hardly see. Large square shapes that had to be storage crates took up most of the room. Jalisa squinted and tried to make out one of their labels, but failed. Marie guided them through the maze of storage crates and to a set of stairs. Jaleesa went first, holding Nikita's hand and leading her. They soon arrived at a landing and door. Marie knocked on it a few times before it opened. The light blinded the girls. Jaleesa blinked a few times and looked around Marie's shape once she had regained her vision. An enormous white man with a sour expression held a bottle of something. Jaleesa's muscles tightened in fear. "Hey, Stone. I brought by a girl looking for a job." Marie's bubbly voice seemed out of place on the dark stairs. "Oh." He quickly moved out of the way. Marie walked in, and Jaleesa and Nikita followed. The man set down his beverage before wiping his hands on his shirt and giving Jaleesa a dazzling smile. "I am so sorry for the mess. I was not expecting company." "It's fine." Jaleesa reached out and shook his hand while still holding on to Nikita with the other one. His hand easily dwarfed hers. Standing at 6 feet, Stone was intimidating. His hair was so light that his crew cut made him look bald. A detailed tattoo of a dragon with 2 heads curled around his biceps. He dressed casually in a loose t-shirt with the sleeves cut off and a pair of black pajama pants. His eyes were the shade that could only be described as icy, and Jaleesa could almost feel their chill as he raked them up and down her curvy form. "And you are?" He lowered his hand to Nikita, his voice sounding too friendly for his appearance. "Nikita." She sounded a bit too happy for Jaleesa's liking. Her older sister hoped she was just being friendly. "Well, Miss Nikita, how about I set you up on the Xbox and your sister and I can talk about getting her a job?" he asked, smiling to reveal a set of perfectly straight, white teeth. "You have an Xbox?" Nikita let go of Jaleesa's hand and smiled back at him. Jaleesa and Nikita walked over to the main area of the studio apartment. A giant TV was surrounded by chairs and a coffee table in a living room type setup. He let Nikita flip through his games, and it took a while before she found one that wasn't rated mature. The TV turned on to a loud building block game, and Nikita was instantly enthralled. She sat cross-legged on the shaggy white rug in front of it and started playing. Marie walked over and lounged on one of the seats, quietly sipping a beer. Stone excused himself to change into more reasonable clothing. By the time he emerged in the same t-shirt and jeans, Jaleesa had taken a seat on one of the plush couches. He took so long to change that Jaleesa was certain that wasn't all he was doing, but she didn't say anything. She simply rose and followed him to the corner where it was quieter. They sat at the kitchen table. "Tell me about why you're here," he murmured to her. "How can I help?" "I just need a job." Jaleesa tried to make eye contact but found his stare was too intense. "I'm willing to work anytime. I can do late nights or early mornings. I can go to work right now if you want. Tell me about you." He placed both elbows on the table and rested his head in his folded hands. "The Semia is a family, and I don't just let anyone into my family." "Well," she hummed. "I'm 18, but don't let my age fool you, I'm ready to work hard dash." "Let me stop you," he interrupted. "Tell me things that don't relate to work. If you're ready to work hard, you'll prove that later. I want to hear about things that matter right now." "Like what?" She reached up and nervously fiddled with one of her long twists. Her emotions were raw enough as it was, she couldn't hold up to being questioned by this stranger. At least Nikita was warm and safe. "Marie doesn't bring just anyone to me. She rescues girls off the street and brings them to me for jobs." He paused and then said in a much softer voice, "Do you have anywhere to sleep tonight?" For a brief moment, she thought she could keep it together. The motions she was making with her hair got rougher as the emotion bubbled up. A lump rose in her throat. She opened and closed her mouth several times, chin quivering. The fear of sleeping in an alley in Los Angeles was something she never wanted to know. No, she admitted, tears blurring her vision. Her body felt shaky inside, and something inside of her snapped. We just got here today. We don't have anywhere to go. Well, I'm glad that Marie managed to find you before you had to sleep on the streets. You'd be shocked at the stories I hear from homeless women just like you. The last girl Marie brought to me was held down and shot up with drugs over and over until she developed an addiction and willingly did whatever the dealer wanted. Oh, hey now. Stone stopped in the middle of his inappropriate story when she started sobbing. I'm so sorry. I've just been through too much too fast. One hand placed on her fluttering chest, she started from the beginning. My mom was never in the picture. She would have abandoned us before we were even out of her if it was possible. My father raised us. He was a good man. I take it something happened to him? Stone asked. He died of stomach cancer. It was a long, slow death. You could tell he was in constant pain, but he still kept that smile up. He'd joke around with the nurses, blaming the cancer on too much good home cooking or years of scraping his vegetables into the trash. He could make a friend out of a rock. Jaleesa laughed a bittersweet tone. His funeral was a few days ago. You've got to be joking. Damn. Stone whistled, his eyebrows shooting up. It's all true, sadly. What happened next was even worse. The state stepped in since I had only recently turned 18 and Nikita is only 14. They didn't help one bit. Our mother was untraceable, and we had no other relatives who could take us in. Nikita was to go into foster care, and I was to be shipped to a halfway house on the other side of the state. Jaleesa shook her head. I took Nikita and ran as far away as we could go by bus. We got here this morning with a little money and some personal possessions. I knew it maybe wasn't the best choice. Nikita's life has basically been destroyed. She used to play softball and sing in the choir. Those were so important to her. All of her friends are hundreds of miles away, and she isn't allowed to contact them or the department could find us and try to separate us. Again. Don't even get me started about how bad it is that I pulled her out of school. Then there's my life. I graduated high school in May of this year. I was working on going to college. Maybe become a chef. I waited tables and helped my father pay the bills when he got sick. I didn't have a boyfriend. But there was this guy I was talking to. Jaleesa, I've helped homeless women before. Together we can make a plan to get you back onto your feet. He leaned across the table and held her hand. Squeezing tightly, he rubbed his thumb across her knuckles. Jaleesa kept the look of shock off of her face but did not manage to keep her hand still. She pulled it out of his grip and brought it closer to her body. Hey, Stone sounded a bit offended. It's okay now. She chuckled nervously, an instinctive response when being touched by a man she didn't like. He laughed as well, and the confident sound was loud enough to drown out everything else. Suddenly, Stone stood up and leaned over Jaleesa, his form towering above hers. Fear pumped through her as her eyes widened. He pulled her close to his chest and wrapped his arms around her. Nose forcefully pressed to his chest, Jaleesa realized Stone had a sharp, acidic yet smoky smell that clung to his clothes. That, combined with his forceful touching, made her want to throw up. His hands moved down from her shoulders and rubbed hard circles where the band of her bra stretched across her back. She quickly gave him a squeeze on his shoulder so that he would think positively about her and give her a job. Thankfully, after a few seconds, the door opened loudly. Stone jerked away as if she had caught on fire and ran into the kitchen. He stood next to the bread box, looking aggressive. Jaleesa watched him for a moment before she figured out that he hid weapons, most likely handguns, around the apartment. Marie rolled her head toward the door. "It's Eric," Marie said, sounding bored. Stone relaxed and took his hand off of the bread box. He walked back over to the kitchen table and took the seat directly beside of Jaleesa instead of his previous one across the table. Eric walked in and stood in the middle of the room, looking around at the guests. Jaleesa knew immediately that he was different than Stone or Marie. He dressed in a well-tailored black suit that made his pale white skin particularly striking. His brown hair was styled in a sleek undercut, with the long top part sweeping over and framing his handsome face. He had a rock-hard jawline and curious blue eyes. Jaleesa's heart missed a beat when he looked over her sitting with Stone. She was suddenly aware that she wasn't wearing makeup and that her jeans were stained. "Stone," Eric said, his Russian accent made his voice sound like music. "Why are these girls here? How old are they?" "Jaleesa is 18. She's an adult." Stone gave Eric a wide smile and reached over to pat Jaleesa's thigh. "And her?" Eric gestured toward Nikita, who had paused her game to look over at the handsome stranger. "I'm 14, almost an adult." Nikita spoke up. "Stone. Office. Now." Eric didn't wait for a response. He walked back to the door and Stone followed, looking like a kicked puppy. Marie waited until the two had had enough time to walk down the stairs before speaking. "Now that the boys are gone, let's do some fun girl stuff." She wobbled as she stood up and Jaleesa noticed the collection of empty beer cans next to her chair. "Let's get drunk and paint each other's nails." "We don't drink," Jaleesa said. Marie looked at her like she was crazy, so she reminded Marie that they were both underage. "That doesn't matter." Marie laughed and went off to collect nail polish. "I like it here," Nikita said. "Are these people going to give you a job? Can I stay here and play sometimes?" "Nikita." Jaleesa sighed. "Nothing is certain yet." A small part of Jaleesa hoped that Stone would turn them down. He did not seem like the kind of person Jaleesa wanted to work for. Right now, he didn't have that much power over her life. She could collect Nikita and walk out to find something better. The more she took from him, the more power he would have. Stone gave off bad vibes and giving him power made Jaleesa very uncomfortable. She was stuck between a rock and a hard place. Marie came back out with a box of nail polish remover, and a towel. She spread the towel over the white shag rug Nikita was sitting on before calling Jaleesa over. The three girls sat around the towel and dug through the nail polish bottles. "You work for Stone, right?" Jaleesa asked as she eyed the bright red nail polish in Nikita's hand. "Yeah." Marie hummed. "Oh, baby, you don't want red. Boys will get the wrong idea. Try a beautiful blue or a pink. Pastels look the best on dark-skinned women like you, in my opinion. On light-skinned people, they just look like how watered-down soda tastes. That's why I only wear bold colors. Try a light yellow. You always look good in that, Dot." Jaleesa said. For her, it wasn't about what colors went with what skin, she just didn't want men to think Nikita was older than 14. Nikita was already starting to develop curves and wearing bras. She hadn't started her period yet, but it could happen at any moment. Jaleesa noticed the way men looking at Nikita had changed. Too many young women grew up too fast, and Jaleesa would make sure that didn't happen to Nikita. "How is Stone?" Jaleesa asked as she held out a pastel yellow to Nikita. "He's okay. I mean, he's got his good and bad, just like any other boss." Marie shook up a couple bottles of what was basically the same shade of red before carefully selecting one. And you're a bartender? Is that difficult? Jaleesa didn't want to deal with drunks all day, but if it kept them off the streets then it was worth it. It's pretty easy most of the time. Sometimes there's a party going on, and you've got to get, 100 drinks done now, but most of the time it's slow. The Semia isn't as popular as some other bars in LA. This neighborhood hasn't been gentrified yet, so tourists don't usually come around. Those are the customers who suck the worst. Oh, we just got here. Oh, what's good? Oh, I heard this was the bar they shot some music video in. Marie put her hands up and mocked tourists in a high-pitched voice before she remembered that the sisters had just got here today. Sorry. It's okay. Nikita smiled. We aren't tourists. We're living in Los Angeles now, same as you. Is Stone a good boss? Has he fired many people unfairly? Ever been sued for sexual harassment? Jaleesa asked, mostly wanting to know the answer to the last question. Oh, he's fine. Marie waved around her hands while Jaleesa selected the bottle of polish on top, a dark blue with some flecks of glitter in it. We only get employees here and there. Mostly, it's just me and Stone who run the bar. But I thought that the two of you took girls off of the streets a lot. Jaleesa painted Nikita's nails while trying to make sense of the conflicting stories. We do, they just usually have jobs of their own. Marie stumbled on her explanation a bit, and Jaleesa started to worry that it wasn't the goodness of their heart that was driving Marie and Stone to help young women off of the streets. Can you do stripes? Nikita asked, oblivious to what was happening in Jaleesa's mind. I can. Marie grabbed Nikita's hand. You focus on your own nails, Jaleesa. Jaleesa didn't really want to paint her nails, but she played along. Marie chatted with Nikita like one might talk with a child. They mostly talked about softball and school, nothing of consequence. Eventually, the door opened, and Eric and Stone came back in. Eric took a seat in the corner and said nothing. So, Eric and I were talking, and we think it would be best if you come and work for us. We know you don't have any bartending experience since you're underage, but Marie can show you the ropes. Stone sat on the couch near the girls and watched them getting along with a big smile. That's great. I can start work any time you want. Jaleesa told herself that it was just until something better came along. We'll have you start tomorrow. His voice got softer, and he laid a hand on Jaleesa's shoulder. I also think you and Nikita should move in. There's a spare room with a queen bed and a closet. Really? Nikita said. Praise God. How much for rent? Jaleesa asked. There had to be a catch somewhere. It's free. Stone squeezed her shoulder. You can feel free to think of this as your home, too. Any food, clothing, or things we have are yours, too. How much is the pay? Jaleesa asked. Free rent and food sounded good, but she also needed money to send Nikita to school eventually. Not to mention fake IDs so they could build up a whole new life. How does Stone started? 500, Eric said from his corner. Weekly. Eric, Stone growled. This is my employee, not yours. Payday is Friday. Eric ignored Stone. You will have to work for it, though. I expect you to be a full-time bartender. Your little sister will work, too. She will clean the bar during the day, and you will work the bar at night. I'm okay with that, Nikita said, giving Jaleesa a reassuring look. We need Sunday off. Jaleesa was firm. My sister and I are very religious. That day belongs to God. Of course. Stone shrugged. Sunday off is fine. I accept. I would shake your hand, but my nails are wet. Jaleesa laughed, a weight lifting from her shoulders.
Chapter 3. The two girls had next to nothing when they unpacked their new room. Marie took pity on them and bought them new flannel sheets, fluffy blankets and pillows, silk curtains, and some posters for Nikita. Everything was top quality and luxurious because Marie didn't believe in buying things that were poorly made. She insisted that they would just fall apart. Though it was extravagant, the girls had a lot of fun decorating. Their room was small, probably a renovated office, but it had a window and just enough space for the two of them. The queen-sized bed fit the two comfortably, and Jaleesa assembled a simple dresser for their clothes. Nikita hung up posters of softball stars and other people who inspired her. Their father's Bible rested on the nightstand, and Jaleesa gave it a soft stroke every night. Jaleesa tried to keep a mental checklist of how much she owed Marie for the bedroom things but stopped after $600. Even worse was the clothes. Every article of clothing Marie purchased the two was at least $50. Jaleesa worried each time they entered a store that Marie would make the girls feel bad about spending her money. But Marie never did. She sat outside the dressing room and clapped every time Nikita came out to spin around. She even went to a salon with the girls to get their hair done. Marie ended up with a $100 haircut that just barely looked different, and Nikita got a thick strip of her hair dyed teal before being styled into an updo. Jaleesa was very happy with her twists and color, so she just sat in the waiting room and watched the girls. After a couple of days had passed, the guilt from spending so much of a stranger's money had passed. Marie never brought it up or implied that she was waiting for Jaleesa to pay her back. The woman just honestly enjoyed shopping more than anything. She regularly joked about how she herself was a stimulus to the local economy. The tip jar on the bar even said, "New shoes." Jaleesa saw how much went into the tip jar and wondered how she had so much money to throw around but didn't ask. It wasn't her business. Extremely proud of her first few days of work, Jaleesa had made around $80 in tips. It wasn't much, but it was enough to buy a couple taxi rides around town. Nikita printed off a map of all the local churches, and the two girls rode over to them before Jaleesa started her shift at the bar. During the taxi ride, Jaleesa discovered something she wished didn't exist: a crush on Stone. "Stone's kinda cute, huh?" Nikita watched the city pass out of the window. "No, he is not." Jaleesa's eyebrows knitted together and she stared at the back of her sister's head in shock. Eventually, Nikita turned around. "He is. He's got lots of muscles." Nikita got a dreamy look in her eye. "Did he try to do anything to you?" Jaleesa didn't know much about Stone and his quality of character, so she had to make sure. "No, but..." Nikita tried to hide her smile with her hands. "I think it would be nice to hold hands. Maybe when I grow up, he could kiss me." "Nikita, you will find someone your own age. Stone is in his 20s. He has no business being with a little girl." Jaleesa shook her head. Nikita pouted. Jaleesa remembered being that age and still having so much to learn about the world. Her first crush was on a much older man, too. It was the teenage grandson of two elderly people from their church. He was 19 while Jaleesa was only 13. When he stayed with his grandparents for the summer, Jaleesa fawned over him. She baked him brownies and flirted with him. She cut out pictures of wedding dresses from magazines and even told her father that they were getting married. She understood the appeal of older men and also the danger. "You get to have crushes." Nikita stuck out her bottom lip. "I'm an adult. If a man has a crush on me back, he's not a pedophile." Jaleesa explained the difference. "I'm practically a woman," Nikita kept on. "You just like Stone for yourself." "Nikita," Jaleesa said firmly as the cab stopped in front of the first church. "Watch it. You're not being kind. You're not Dad." Nikita threw open the cab door and ran away into the church. Jaleesa threw some bills at the driver and went after Nikita. It wasn't about Stone. Nikita was a girl who had just lost her father. There was no way of telling how her teenage emotions would react. In most ways, she was still a child. a child who was thrown into the cold and unforgiving world of reality too soon. Jalisa knew that this would not be the last time she lashed out. Jalisa looked over the congregation space. It was massive, with pews made of rich mahogany and velvet. A worker dressed in a suit made adjustments to a sign near the back. Posters with an even grander church saying, "Help us reach our goal," were posted near the donation and tithe cans. Jalisa immediately knew that it was not the church for them. Churches based on money were not of the Lord. "Come on, Nikita." Jalisa walked through the empty aisles to where Jalisa was pouting. "This is not for us. Why do you always get to decide what is right for us?" Nikita balled up her fists. "Maybe I like it here. I don't decide. The Bible does." "Nikita, look around. Churches shouldn't have this much money. These seats cost thousands of dollars that could have gone to feed the hungry. Real disciples would sit on the dirt to hear the message of the Lord." Jalisa sat down on the cushy pew and Nikita slid down the bench, crossing her arms over her chest. "Maybe they mostly have old people who worship here. The elderly in our old church have padded seats." Nikita defended the church and Jalisa sighed. "Do you have the list? Maybe somewhere in a poorer part of town we'll focus on good deeds. Money corrupts." Jalisa noticed Nikita was close to crying. "Do you disagree? Does it matter?" Nikita huffed. "Mom, you're being needlessly cruel." Jalisa focused on her faith so she wouldn't snap back. "You need to pray for forgiveness." "I think I should decide what I do." Nikita held her hands to her face and rubbed at the tears that were silently falling. Jalisa could see the fear in her sister's shaking form. She pulled her in for a hug, and while Nikita resisted at first, eventually she hugged her older sister back. "I'm so sorry," Nikita sobbed. "I miss Dad so much it hurts. I can feel it in my chest and in my stomach." "Then you are alive." Jalisa rubbed soothing circles into her sister's back. "We will see Dad again. He is in heaven watching over us. Let's do our best to make him proud." "Marie told me where Eric used to go to church." Nikita sniffled. "Apparently, they also run a thrift store and a food bank." "Good. That sounds like a better place." Jalisa looked around at all the stained glass windows. She understood wanting to build something beautiful for God to see, but to her that was a homeless shelter or a free clinic, not a golden steeple with a jeweled cross. As the two girls rode to Eric's old church, Jalisa thought more and more about how to help her sister grieve. A counseling group for girls Nikita's age would be good, but she doubted something so specific would exist in their town. She would just have to pray for Nikita and make sure they were going to church as much as possible. She also thought about Nikita's crush. It was harmless right now, but it had to be stopped before anything happened. Jalisa would make an effort to introduce Nikita to boys her own age at their new church. After all, she was right. Jalisa got to have crushes. She had one right now. Jalisa didn't mean to have a crush on Eric. It just kind of happened one day. He was hanging around at the bar, swirling around an old-fashioned. His handsome face was twisted up in pain, and his hands shook quite a bit. Jalisa found herself wanting to reach out, gather his hands in hers and whisper a prayer against his lips. It wasn't just a physical attraction, though Jalisa would not deny that it was there. He was very quiet, but when he did speak, he was whip-smart and had a great sense of humor. He respected her and was kind to her little sister, both of which were paramount to Jalisa. Eric often stopped by just to check on everyone in the apartment, making sure that they had food and necessities. Finding out Eric was a Christian was only icing on the cake. They were greeted as soon as they walked through the doors to Eric's old church. An older woman who smelled of peppermints pulled them into her arms and squeezed them tight. She murmured a prayer before letting them go. "I'm sorry for intruding on our personal space, but Jesus told me you really needed a blessing." She looked at the girls with the same kind eyes that their father had. "You're not doing so well, are you?" "No, we are not. It's getting better," Jalisa answered. She put one hand on her sister's shoulder and squeezed. "We're new in town, and we're looking for a church to join. You come on and stay for sermon then. Brother Mike is ideal for those of us who are having hard times. Afterward, we have a meal in the hall downstairs. He preaches love and light in the Lord, Not any of that fire and brimstone stuff. She directed the girls into the congregation room. It was packed for such a small building. People of all colors, sizes, and ages had gathered around the podium. Some did not fit in the pews, so the young and healthy stood to the side. A couple of young men gave up their seats, and Jalisa tried to refuse, but they insisted. She sat in their seats, and people all around them introduced themselves. Jalisa noticed Nikita watching a handsome mixed boy her own age walk around, and hoped the two would hit it off. Small children gathered around as two seeing-eye dogs walked around the pews. The Golden Labs played with the children until the pastor came out. A woman in the back called their names, and they returned to their owner. Jalisa watched as they sat up in the pew like people. Nikita giggled. Brothers and sisters, welcome. The pastor, a middle-aged black man with long dreadlocks and a suit with a blue tie, started. Today is a new day. I hope today treats you very well, but if it doesn't, I want you to know you are not alone. I want you all to unburden yourself today. There are those of you out there who have fear in your hearts. Trust in the Lord, and He will take that fear and replace it with love, the strongest force of all. Amen. A chorus of agreement spread through the room before the pastor went on. I've got to tell you, folks, I don't fear evil. I don't fear it one bit. Not a thing on this earth is stronger than Jesus. No evil a man or the devil can create, not a war or a famine or a plague, is more powerful than Jesus. I don't care what you're going through. You're not alone. God is always there. And if you put your trust in Him, He will kick evil's butt. Hallelujah. A few people put their hands up. I don't care if your car broke down. I don't care if your house is about to be foreclosed. I don't care if your son is on drugs. I don't care if your baby mama is trying to take you to court. Put trust in the Lord and lean not on your own understanding. The pastor looked around the room for a moment of silence. Let us pray quickly for the new faces in the room as well as the old. The congregation bowed their heads, and the pastor closed his eyes. Dear Heavenly Father, I thank you for giving us another day in this world you have made for us. I want to acknowledge the new faces here and ask that you bless them, for there is a reason they are here tonight. I ask that you bless the members here and request that you make their hearts soft to my voice so that they may hear the words which you have given me. In Jesus' name, Amen. Amen, the congregation answered. Now, in the same way, I want you to know that we are never alone. I want you to see that God may use others to carry out His holy will. You may not see God walk through your door and cleanse your son of his addiction, but you may meet somebody sent by God to help you. Walking down the street, there may be a nurse at a rehab facility. At the grocery store, there may be a mechanic willing to work pro bono. At the church, you may find help with your bills. Talk to us, people. We don't have a lot of money, but we will take up donations to help members of the congregation. Yes, Lord. A very skinny white woman with a pink cap on spoke out. Sister Martha. The pastor nodded to her. She was diagnosed with cancer. The church collected donations from members to help pay her bills. We organized fundraisers and even had a bake sale. Through prayer and medicine, we are working to heal Sister Martha. I'd like to testify. An elderly man held up his hand. Brother Max. The preacher nodded. May your words grace the Lord. I was sitting at a bus stop a week ago, and I saw an angel come down and enter a woman. She crossed the street and talked to a homeless man sitting under the liquor store sign. Turned out he had been stabbed last night. No one cared, and he was too weak to move. She called him an ambulance and saved his life. Most beautiful thing I ever saw in my 80 years. He sat down after a round of applause. That's what I'm talking about. The Lord comes to people and works through them. There may come a time in your life when you, too, feel the pull to help somebody. Listen to it, for it is the Lord. Trust your feelings. Trust other people. Above all else, trust in the Lord. Allow the Lord to be a force for good in your life. The pastor continued on with his sermon. Jalisa felt as though he was speaking directly to her. She needed to put her trust into other people if she was going to make it through her hardships. The larger woman squeezed her younger sister to her body in a seated hug. Nikita clutched at her shirt and hid her face. Soon, the telltale feeling of wetness sinking through her shirt, and the soft shakes of Nikita's body indicated that she was sobbing. Lord, bless this girl. A woman from a pew behind the sister rested a hand upon Nikita's shaking back and began to pray. Thick trails of tears began to leak from Jalisa. This sense of belonging and acceptance and care was what she missed most about her old church. More people laid hands on the sisters, and they eventually got the attention of the pastor. Jalisa told him that their father had recently passed, and he led the group in prayer. Jalisa felt a weight lift off of her. After the sermon, the two stayed to mingle. The mixed boy turned out to be the pastor's son, and Jalisa pushed Nikita into talking to him. They chatted as kids would and discovered that both of them followed Major League Baseball. Jalisa watched the two with a smile. This would be the end of the crush on Stone. The fellowship dinner in the basement was just like the ones at Jalisa's old church. The women of the church went all out, cooking and baking enough to feed the city. Pots and pans filled with any food you could want lined a buffet table. Plates passed back and forth between as everyone sampled everything. Laughter rose to the ceiling. Children ran around. Nikita joined the kids in playing tag while Jalisa found some older women and asked about the church. They had a children's choir and some sports, though there was no softball. By the time Jalisa and Nikita were ready to head home, they had signed up for choir and enrolled in Sunday school. They were offered leftovers to take home but declined. Stone and Marie's beer took up most of the fridge. Did you have fun? Jalisa asked, already knowing the answer. Yes. Andre is cute. Nikita bounced her leg up and down excitedly. Did you make any other friends? Jalisa casually flipped through a brochure about the church. I met a couple girls. One said her birthday was coming up, and if I'm still coming to that church by then, I'm invited. Nikita clapped her hands. It was such a blessing to see her being carefree. I think we found our church. Jalisa reached over and pinched Nikita's cheek right where her dimples were. I think we did too. Nikita beamed. I want to go back. It was twilight by the time the cab driver pulled up at the Semia. A cluster of cars in the adjacent parking lot told Jalisa that she was most likely late for her shift. Once again, she had to throw money at the driver and run. The two entered through the front door. They were technically supposed to use the side door, but Nikita was terrified of that alley. Marie was mostly the only person downstairs, and she promised not to tell. If Stone was downstairs, the girls would just say that they were ready to get to work immediately. Marie wasn't downstairs tonight, and there was a whole line of people waiting to get drinks. There was no way of telling how long she had been gone, what she was doing, or if anyone had stolen drinks. Jalisa made her way through the horde of sweaty bodies in the way while holding Nikita's hand. She hopped behind the bar and started slinging alcohol as fast as possible. The smell of alcohol hung in the air like a fog, tickled her nose and made her want to sneeze. Jalisa desperately tried to remember what went in what drink and in what order. She had a cheat sheet behind the bar, but the orders were coming in so fast that she could barely look at it, and when she did, the drink was often not even listed. Nikita, though she was not supposed to be going near the bar, helped out by grabbing beer out of the cooler for people who just wanted a glass. The two girls were a flurry of hands for about 10 minutes. Eventually, the bar calmed down as people settled in with their drinks. Where in the world was Marie? She picked a Saturday night to disappear. Jalisa told Nikita to only hand out beer and not to even try to mix drinks. She told her exactly where she was going, and to come get her if anything bad happened. Jalisa went up the stairs and was about to open the door when a loud crash came from the other side. She recoiled from the doorknob and leaned down to listen from under the crack. Give me what I want. The longer I stay up here, the more money you lose. I bet those drunks have hopped the bar and are emptying the register as we speak. Marie's voice was cold as death and twice as mean. Bitch, you know I can replace what you lose 10 times over, Stone said, and there was another big crash. I brought you two, Marie screeched. I brought you two so you could let one go. I don't want to let one go, Stone screamed. Get it through your fucking head. You said I could leave. The unmistakable sound of Marie's heels on the tiles echoed. I was high. I was just saying whatever the hell popped into my mind. You're mine. Stone was getting louder, and Jalisa worried for Marie's safety. "I'm done being your prostitute. I hate fucking strangers. That's why I brought you 2 new ones." Marie screamed, and Jalisa's hand flew to her mouth. This couldn't be real. "Hey there. Did you know that we've other hot romances like this that we want to release? But we need your help. Subscribing shows us that you're part of our journey and allows us to make more of these stories at a higher quality. So please, my queen, subscribe to the Romancely YouTube channel now. Thanks. Now back to your story."
Chapter 4. Jalisa had to pinch herself to make sure she wasn't dreaming. Muscles shaking, her breath caught in her throat. Ever so carefully, she reached up and cracked open the door. Once it was possible to see a sliver of what was happening, she stopped and pressed her face into the crack. Broken glass was strewn across the floor, and it was probably the cause of the loud crashes Jalisa had heard. Marie stood in a tight red dress and kitten heels, her form shaking with anger. Stone stood in front of her, strong arms crossed in front of his chest. Eric was in the back, pinching the bridge of his nose out of frustration. The entire scene looked like a Renaissance painting. I held up my end of the bargain. You have 2 new girls. One is only 14, a lot of sickos would pay their entire life saving just to watch. The other is only 18, and probably a virgin from the way she goes on spouting about God nonstop. These are the 2 biggest cash cows you could ask for. Plus, the sisters thing might do it for some, Marie insisted. You're a real dumb bitch. I already told you, there is no bargain. What I say when I'm high does not count. I say all sorts of shit when I'm high. I tried to convince Eric for half an hour that fish lived on the moon. Stone laughed in her face. Fish living on the moon is more likely than you ever leaving me, babe. Fuck you. I'm never coming back here. I don't owe you shit anymore. Marie spit at his feet. I will fucking kill you. Stone said the statement like it was completely normal. He didn't sound one bit angry, and that made Jalisa think he was much more dangerous than she had previously realized. Marie lunged for the bread box and Stone grabbed her and threw her down in the broken glass. Jalisa gasped in horror before covering her mouth. Thankfully, Marie's screams of pain covered up Jalisa's one sound. Eric hopped up and put his hands on Stone's shoulder. Though he was smaller than Stone, Stone relaxed and stepped back. I agree with Marie, he said. Ha! Marie managed to say while trying to stand up in broken glass. The 2 girls should not be made into prostitutes, Eric said. He glanced between Marie and Stone like he wanted to help her but was afraid to turn his back to Stone. The 2 men engaged in a staring contest while Marie shakily made her way back on her feet. Bright red rivulets of blood streamed down her legs and arms. The woman threw her long blonde hair over her shoulder before turning on Eric. They are perfectly capable of being prostitutes. She stood beside them blocking Jalisa's view. I picked them out to be prostitutes. Why the hell else should they stay here? They can be employees of the bar. They just keep doing what they're doing. Eric paused. You could bring up prostitution to Jalisa and see what she says. She is an adult and can choose to be a sex worker if she wants to. I highly doubt she'll want to do it voluntarily, though. No fucking shit, Stone growled. You think any one of those girls wanted to do it? They all had either a fucking tragedy like Jalisa or a drug addiction. The 2 will be working girls. You would make a working girl out of a 14-year-old? Eric sounded disgusted. I'll wait until she's older before I auction her off. Stone snorted a laugh. This was all just a game to him. If I had to do it, so do they. Marie stepped in between Stone and Eric and landed a finger on Stone's chest. I also expect to be let go. This bullshit again. Let me spell it out for you. You try to leave, and you will be dead. He sighed. Drop it before I get really angry. Eric, she whined. Tell him that bringing in those two mean I can go. The two girls aren't working. That is final. Eric made some sort of motion with his hands that Jaleesa couldn't see. The fuck you say? They are my girls. I do what I want with them. Stone grabbed Marie and shoved her toward the couch. She stumbled in her heels and fell onto it. He placed a finger on Eric's chest much like Marie had done to him. Normally, you don't care about the junkies Marie drags in here. Something different this time, huh? These girls aren't junkies. They're just people trying to make a new life after their father died. Not to mention Nikita's 14. Eric ignored Stone's physical contact. They aren't junkies. Their poor little dad died, and they're making a new life. Stone mocked Eric in a high-pitched voice. Nikita's only 14. Stone, please. Stone, please what? Not fuck Jaleesa? He smirked. That's it, isn't it? You like her. You just can't stand the thought of another man fucking her. Oh, I can't wait to wrap her twists around my hand and jerk her head back. I like doing curvy girls from behind. Cut it out. Eric reached up and hit Stone's finger from his chest. I wonder how customers would like to fuck her. Hey, Marie? What position do most men like to take their prostitutes in? Stone called out. They like to be ridden, she answered weakly from the couch. Jaleesa directed her attention back to Marie just in time to see the woman pick up an already opened beer can and begin to finish it off. Blood from her wounds had been smeared around, making it look like she was wearing some sort of pantyhose. Wow, can you imagine what that looks like? Her body just bouncing up and down, working her magic all over other men. Stone laughed. Then they sling some money at her and I get most of it. Incredible. I told you to cut it out. Eric balled up his fists. Jaleesa's mind raced with what to do if they started fighting. Breaking it up herself would put her in danger and calling the cops was out of the question. She would just have to pray for Eric not to be hurt badly. Stone shoved Eric's chest. He stumbled back a foot before throwing the first punch. Stone saw it coming, probably purposefully provoking Eric to fight, and caught it. He twisted Eric's arm behind him and pushed upward. Eric thrust his head backward, smashing his skull into Stone's nose. He let go with a cry of pain. A thick trickle of dark red blood rolled down his nose and caught on his upper lip. Eric used the opportunity to grab Stone and throw him into the kitchen table. The edge bit deep into his midsection, and he doubled over on top of it, hands splaying out. Stone lunged for the kitchen counter, and Jaleesa briefly worried that he might be going for the bread box, but he instead grabbed a knife. The two men danced around, Stone trying to hit Eric with the knife. Eric jumped all over the floor, moving as quickly as his tight-fitting suit pants and dress shirt would allow him. He was 1 second too late, and Stone sliced into Eric's arm. Eric cried out in pain, his hand immediately covering the injury. Stone stopped to laugh at Eric's blood, which gave Eric the opportunity to charge at Stone. Stone dropped the knife as they hit the tabletop. Protesting first with a groan and then a crash, the table collapsed under their combined weight. Eric got up first, waiting until Stone stumbled up and went for the knife on the floor. While he was bent over, Eric kicked the seat of his pants hard, and Stone head-butted the side of the couch. Back off, asshole, Marie spit as she was disturbed by the moving of the couch. Stone stood up slower this time, his hands grasping at his neck. Before the larger man could stand up, Eric kicked the back of his knee, using his own weight against him. Stone fell down to his knees, and Eric put both of his hands together to come down on Stone's head hard. Stone threw his body backward, causing Eric to fall down. His head hit the tile floor hard, and he didn't move for a moment. Jaleesa softly began praying to herself as the fear crept up inside of her. She called upon the words of the pastor and reminded herself that God was always with her. The larger man stood over Eric and grabbed a beer bottle from the floor. He threw it hard at Eric's head, but the thick glass didn't break. Stone grunted in dissatisfaction and stalked over to the kitchen to get a better object. Eric's eyes fluttered open just in time to rush for the knife. Jaleesa felt a glimmer of hope now that Eric had a weapon, but the fight wasn't over yet. Grabbing the beer bottles that littered the counter, Stone threw objects at Eric. He dodged most of them, but a few hit their target. Eric began to walk towards Stone, and the larger man grabbed a toaster and threw it with both hands. Eric jumped out of the way, but the cord whipped him across the face. Jaleesa tugged on her twists as the men battled. The fight was a pretty even match, and the two men eventually dropped any weapons and just beat each other with their fists. Eric wrestled his way on top and stayed there. His movements slowed until he was a panting heap onto of a motionless Stone. The silence felt like forever, but it was only a few minutes before Eric spoke. "Go clean yourself up and get back down to the bar," he said. Marie grunted. It was then that Jaleesa realized that Nikita was still down alone at the bar. Distracted by her thoughts of Nikita, she didn't notice Eric was approaching the door until he was a few feet away. She tucked her fingers under the door and quickly pulled it shut. Her feet crashed down the stairs, but it wasn't fast enough. "Jaleesa." A bloody mess and clutching his arm, Eric quietly called out to her. In the middle of this perilous situation, her fight or flight response sparked. One slim brown hand reached into her pocket and grabbed the color-coded keys Marie had given her for the employee door. If need be, she would fight her way out of here and to Nikita. Fitting them neatly in between her fingers, she braced herself before turning to meet her possible threat. "I won't hurt you." His voice was gentle. Eric approached her as if she was a sleeping tiger, ready to pounce at the first sign of sudden movement. "I won't let you." She slunk down low and tried to keep track of him through the flashing lights coming from the main bar room. "I am not like those people." He came close, and she backed into a crate. "Can't you tell that I am different? I don't enjoy hurting people. Look into my eyes and see that I am different." To be able to discover his true intents by looking into his eyes was such a romantic notion, one she did not believe in. He came closer, and she lashed out in warning, missing him on purpose. His entire body tensed and he slowly lowered himself to the ground. The rational part of her mind cut through the adrenaline, and she lowered her fist. "Marie will be coming down soon. If she sees you, she will warn Stone that the jig is up. He will try to force you into sex work very quickly. Right now, you've got about 2 weeks before he will make his move. He wants you to be dependent on him, to need him more than anything, and that takes time. If you play along, you might be able to escape with enough money and resources to build a life here. Let's go somewhere and talk." Eric's blood dripped onto the floor, and she saw just how vulnerable he was. "All right, but I'm warning you. I may not be strong or have any experience in fighting, but I will fight for my life and the life of my sister with a fire that will burn you alive." She returned her keys to her pocket and held out her hand. "I don't doubt it." Eric's blood squished in between them. The two moved quickly to the bar floor. People were gathered around the counter again, and Nikita was swamped. Jaleesa shoved Eric into the bathroom, thankful that no one noticed his injuries. She washed her hands in the counter sink and took place next to Nikita. "What do you mean you can't make a sex on the beach?" A white woman with a curled lip leaned across the counter and into Nikita's face. "How old are you?" 12? "I can make it." Relief flooded Nikita's eyes as Jaleesa started mixing together ingredients. "Where were you?" "I was getting scared." Nikita grabbed onto Jaleesa's shirt. "Is this blood? Should I call the cops?" "No, baby." Jaleesa turned down the music and waited for the screams of protest to die out before shouting, "We are only serving beer for the next hour." "You're going to be gone for an hour?" Nikita held onto Jaleesa's shirt like a comfort blanket. "I need to take care of something. I'll tell you all about it when we go to sleep tonight." Jaleesa gave her sister a tight hug before dashing off to the bathroom. Throwing open the door, she almost ran into Eric. He was washing the wound on his face with a wet paper towel. The mark across his face was angry and red, puffing up in a threat to scar. He sat on the downed lid of the toilet while Jaleesa hunted under the sink counter. Way in the back, a first aid kit with a yellowing label sat. She pulled it out and turned it over in her hands a few times. A thin layer of dust had collected all around it. "This thing is ancient. Are you sure you don't just want me to take you to the hospital?" she asked. "Band-aids don't exactly expire." He gave her a crooked smile. "Peroxide should be in there, too." She collected the peroxide from the cabinet and a couple towels from the bar while he removed his shirt. The light blue blood-stained fabric was tossed into the corner of the room. Jaleesa tried not to ogle him. It wasn't right, the man was injured. Still, her eyes wandered over to his upper body. He wasn't as muscular as stone, but he did have some definition. His abs hid while he was sitting forward, but when he stretched up to grab a towel from her, they peeked out. His shoulders were broad with a few freckles. A soft dusting of body hair trailed from his navel and disappeared under his pants. A tattoo of a Russian word sat just underneath his left collarbone. Jaleesa took the towel he was applying pressure with and spread it out on the floor to catch the peroxide. She pre-opened all of the gauze, tape, bandages, and ointment she would use and sat them on the sink counter. Almost dropping the peroxide when she caught him staring at her, she gently stretched his arm out. This is going to hurt." "I'm sorry," she said. "It's okay." He leaned toward her, close enough for her to smell his woodsy cologne. "I'm tough." "Didn't you see the fight?" "I did," she admitted. "But you're still human, and you still feel pain." "Go ahead," he whispered. She tipped the bottle and poured hydrogen peroxide all over his cut. His sharp intake of breath was proof that it did hurt. Bubbles fizzed around the cut, and pink-tinted runoff dripped down to the towel. After repeating the process a few times, cold peroxide soaked into the knees of her jeans. "You okay?" she asked before putting the cap back on the bottle. "Doing fine." The words were forced through gritted teeth. Liar. The tension was broken with their shared laughter. "While I've got you here, I want to thank you for beating Stone up. I'm not nearly strong enough to do it myself, and he really deserved it." She quickly followed it up with, "Not that I condone violence, and I'm sure that if it had been left unsettled, God would have fixed it, but it is still nice to see a horrible man get what is coming to him. If you feel that way, then I guess you must have heard most of the conversation." He pressed his lips into a thin line. "When I got there, no one was bleeding," she commented quietly. "I know about Marie bringing us here to make us into prostitutes." "It won't happen," Eric vowed. His eye held hers, truth swimming in their blue depths. The two were quiet for a moment as Jaleesa debated whether or not he was trustworthy. She thought things over while she inspected his wound. It wasn't really that deep, but it was in a dangerous area, right on the forearm, in the meaty part that bleeds heavily. A few inches up and Stone would have accidentally slit Eric's wrist. She closed his wound with butterfly bandages. "Did you really mean what you said? I have 2 weeks to build a life before Stone puts me in a stranger's bed?" Her voice was as soft as her touches on his injuries. "I did." "How can you be so sure? Why do you care in the first place?" She tapped a square of gauze over the butterfly bandages to soak up the blood. "I know Stone. We go way back. I know how he typically works, and therefore I can predict his actions. As for why I care in the first place, well, I think anyone would care for such an amazing girl." He tilted his head like a dog and brown hair spilled across his forehead. Jaleesa reached up without thinking about it and brushed it back into place. "Sorry." Her cheeks burned in embarrassment as her brain caught up to her actions. "It's okay." His non-injured hand came up and tucked one of her twists behind her ear. "Now we're even." It was almost an accident. The two leaned closer and closer until it just happened. A rose petal of a kiss. Soft and gentle with a hint of love. A caressing of lips that promised so much more to come. It was over in a moment, but the feeling lingered. "I've wanted to do that since I first saw you," he murmured against her lips. "I don't believe in love at first sight." She ducked her eyes down and tried to focus on anything else. Taping some gauze down, she rolled more over top of her previous work to protect it. "Then allow me to take you on a date." He pulled his arm back when she was finished. "Where would you take me?" "I'd love to see more of Los Angeles." Jaleesa picked up his shirt from the corner and handed it to him, trying to create a distraction. "I know just the place. How about next Monday?" He tugged the shirt on, blood and all. "I'll think about it." She didn't commit to anything because of the change in her situation. No longer could she sleep soundly at night knowing that Stone was prowling around and plotting to use her body for financial gain. Jaleesa slipped out of the room without giving him a sure answer. Due to the lack of cocktails, the bar's population had thinned out substantially. Marie was back and lounging behind the bar, popping some bubble gum in her mouth. Nikita was slumped over the bar, her lips moving quickly. Her older sister recognized the sight of her in prayer and tapped her gently on the shoulder. "I was so worried." Nikita embraced her sister. "Please explain what's going on." "What is going on?" Marie poked her nose in. Jaleesa noticed that her blood had been cleaned up and the only trace of the altercation was a few pink children's band-aids decorating her limbs. "Please, explain, Jaleesa." "Nothing." Jaleesa faked a smile. "I'm just having a bad stomachache. I think it might be stress." "How do you deal with it?" "Certainly not by putting a 14-year-old in charge of the bar." Marie let a bit of her real personality slip before returning to her facade. "Sorry, I'm stressed, too. I mostly deal with it by shopping. Nothing like a little retail therapy. And alcohol. Lots of alcohol." "That doesn't explain the blood on your shirt," Nikita pointed out. Jaleesa's gray sweater had a few splotches of blood on the side from where she must have grazed Eric's arm. "Oh, that?" Jaleesa batted her eyelashes at Marie to look innocent. "Grenadine syrup. I spilled it on myself. I think that might have actually contributed to the stress. I just felt so bad since you had just bought this for me. And it's so cute. It is so super cute." Marie lit up as Jaleesa began to speak her language.
Chapter 5. This is a pretty long way to go just for a date. Jalisa felt underdressed compared to him, and that made her worry about where they were going. Eric was in his usual tailored suit and dark-colored tie. Jalisa, thinking they would just head over to a local restaurant, was in a red sweater with a white collar, a pair of dark-wash jeans, and some tall black boots. Marie had let her borrow some makeup, but since she was white and very girly, none of it quite fit Jalisa. In the end, Jalisa settled on some light blush and dark eyeliner. "You said you wanted to see Los Angeles, so we're gonna see Los Angeles. I'm taking you to what I consider to be the best little hidden jewel of Los Angeles." He reached one long arm out and turned down the radio. Despite all of his suits, his car was very unassuming. It was a simple black four-door, probably a couple of years old. The inside was meticulously clean and smelled of fresh pine despite the lack of an air freshener. The city whipped around them, and occasionally he would point out a sight or two. When the car finally stopped, they were in front of a garden. "Oh, you charmer." Jalisa waved at him. "I bet you take all the girls here. Only when they're as pretty as you." He reached over and took her hand, giving it one small kiss before sliding out. Jalisa was collecting her purse right as he opened the door. Helping her out, he planted another small kiss to her fingers. Jalisa could almost feel the princess crown atop her head. It was a very welcome change to be treated so well. Since she had found out Stone and Marie's true intentions, her days were filled with praying and tears. The night she had told Nikita what was happening was one of the worst in her life. The look on her little sister's face was one she never wanted to see again for as long as she lived. The two girls had agreed to keep acting normal while Jalisa worked with Eric to make a plan. It proved to be very difficult to feign normalcy. One of Jalisa's biggest fears now was that Stone or Marie would pick up on the little changes in their behavior. Jalisa recoiled from Marie's touches, and their conversations were strained. Nikita no longer smiled at Stone and refused to play video games with him. Jalisa had assured him that she was not mad at him. She only wanted to spend more time to herself so she could process the loss of her father better. It made Jalisa's stomach churn to use her father in a lie, but it was in their own best interest. When Jalisa received her first paycheck, she tucked it away in a pair of socks under the bed. Nikita counted it all up, and they had around $900, $600 after Jalisa bought groceries and paid the one bill she agreed to take on. Apartments in Los Angeles were expensive, and with Jalisa not wanting to be traced, they would first have to buy fake IDs and the papers to back them up. It would take at least $3,000 before they could move out on their own, and even then, Jalisa would have to find a high-paying job and fast. "You're zoning out." Eric stopped on the walkway to the garden. "I promise you everything will be okay. I'll figure this out. I know that you're going to help us, but I still worry. Our lives, Nikita's and mine, are changing so fast. I feel like I'm being thrown around on a roller coaster. Just relax for today." He smiled at her, bringing one hand up to caress her cheek with his thumb before kissing her. "We're at the Exposition Rose Garden. Joy is in the air." He was right. The smell of roses graced her nose and sunshine touched the earth with a heavenly glow. The fall chill was banished in this place and no coats were in sight. Vendors selling sweets and lemonade were lined up on the concrete. If they were a normal couple with normal concerns, this would be a magical first date. But for Jalisa, being forced into sex work was haunting her in the back of her mind. "I'm sorry. I promise that I'm trying to be present." She walked hand in hand with him down the rows and rows of rose bushes. Other couples walked around, their smiling faces mirroring Jalisa and Eric's. They visited each of the vendors, sharing little snacks with each other. Eric got powdered sugar on his face, and Jalisa kissed it off. Excitement buzzed between them as the two grew closer. It was a thrill to learn more about each other. Eric seemed enthralled by minute details of Jalisa's life. "I like to cook," Jalisa said. "I dream about moving to Paris. French cuisine is the crème de la crème. I've looked into it many times as a kid, but French is very hard to learn. I was in France not too long ago," he told her. "Not in Paris, but close to it. The country is beautiful. Most of the people who deal with tourists on a daily basis, shopkeepers, taxi drivers, waitresses, and the like, speak English. It's only when you go into the small towns that finding someone who speaks English becomes a problem. Besides, English is much harder to learn than French. Was it difficult for you to learn English? She asked. Took forever. I started studying when I was 5, and I still couldn't understand English television until I was a teenager. He raised an eyebrow. If I become your boyfriend, will you learn Russian? I don't know. Is it difficult? She batted her eyelashes at him. Komu ty raskazavayish. He made a series of sounds that Jalisa had never heard before. Ty takeowi miley. Kogda ty v zameshattelstv. What? She cocked her head to the side. Please translate. I said, you tell me. Then you looked so cute wrinkling your nose up in confusion that I said, you were so cute when you were confused. He laughed. Will you be learning Russian? No, thank you. Jalisa rested her arms around his neck. She rubbed her lips over his face, feeling the rough texture of his beard stubble. He peppered kisses around her face. I love my mother very much. He kissed her on the nose. She is my best friend. Okay. Jalisa's eyebrows knitted together in confusion. My mother says that if I fall in love with a girl, I must tell her that and she will be mine. His thick Russian accent tickled her ears. She couldn't help but smile. Is she in Russia? Jalisa asked. She is. Eric stopped at a rose bush and gently brushed the petal with his fingertip. I bet you miss her. Jalisa wanted to continue the conversation. How old were you when you came to America? I was around 24 or so. A young, stupid man. I thought I would find easy gold. He shrugged. Turns out you have to work hard for it, just like in Russia. What do you do for work? I never see you working in the bar. You mostly just look at me with those puppy dog eyes. Jalisa led him to a stone bench and they sat. You noticed that, huh? He chuckled before growing awkward. I own businesses. Small stuff, really. It's not interesting. Eric derailed the conversation away from his work and to Jalisa's personal life. They spoke of where Jalisa grew up, her friends at school, Nikita's softball team, and her father. It was all things that made her very homesick. Tears prickling in the corner of her eyes, she expressed how devastating it was to not have a home anymore. Things have been tough for you. I would like to make it better. Give me time. I would just hand you the money to go off on your own. But I've got a lot of business to take care of here. I'm in sort of a transitional period, Eric promised her. Before you ask, yes, I must be able to leave and start a new life with you. I would never send away such a chance to a happy life with a beautiful life. Jalisa started to cry at the emotions welling up inside of her. Eric was beginning to be her knight in shining armor, her light in the darkness. Was she falling for him too fast? Perhaps, but it felt good and it felt right. Something in her connected with him in a way she had never connected to anyone else. Eric pulled her close and wiped away her tears. The two exited the gardens as a soft twilight began to fall. Jalisa got back in her seat, slightly disappointed that the date would soon come to an end. Eric cleared his throat loudly to get her attention. I would like to invite you to my house for wine, but I do not have one. I am staying in a hotel because I have plans to fly to England soon. He focused on the road and could not see the way she bit her lip. The offer still stands, though. I promise it is a good hotel. You will have lots of room, and I will never force you into anything. We can order room service. I don't drink, but that sounds lovely, Jalisa agreed. The hotel was indeed excellent. He resided on the second-to-top floor in a room that could have been an apartment. The walls were cream and baby blue, with plush black carpeting. One king-sized bed full of goose-down pillows and silk blankets sat in the middle. A wooden table with soft chairs was arranged next to the sliding glass door that led out onto the balcony. Jalisa ran a finger over the dark blue bedding. She could feel Eric's presence behind her. Turning to him, a fever lit in her. Bold and certain, she brought his lips to hers. The air was filled with the sound of their soft kisses. Her fingers ran up his strong back and felt of his prickly undercut.
Oh no, it's about to get hot.
But we can't put this on YouTube as they don't allow it. I'm sorry.
But check the description of this video to join Romancely Audio Velvet and get the steamy scenes in future.
If you're already a member, the love scene reference is Her Russian Millionaire, Chapter 5, Love Scene 1.
Okay, back to the story.
He helped her up. Let's order that room service. Would you like a bath? The hotel here provides bath bombs. I've heard they are quite soothing for ladies. I think that's a good idea. Her legs were shaky. A bath would help to cool her overheated flesh and clear her mind. After telling Eric to order her whatever he thought was best, she headed into the bathroom. It was all white tile and cool chrome. The gigantic tub was large enough to hold 2 Jalisas, and she filled it almost all the way to the top. She piled her hair on top of her head and secured it with a hotel shower cap. Stripping her clothes off and leaving them on the counter, she grabbed 2 lavender bath bombs and stepped into the water. Holding 1 bath bomb in each hand, she lowered them into the water. They fizzed and popped in her hand, turning her bath water into a glittery purple fairy tale. She breathed deeply and washed her senses with lavender. Lord, she spoke aloud, I don't know what to do. Things are getting so messed up, and now I'm throwing love into the mix. I know it's ridiculous, but I think I might really like this guy. He treats me well. As you have taught me, love is not about butterflies in my stomach, but it is about caring for another person. It is a matter of commitment. I know I dare not utter the word marriage to this man, but that is my goal. To stand before you in a church with my other half. White dress and veil. I don't know who will give me away now, but I do know that Nikita will be the flower girl. She's always wanted that, but I don't have to tell you that. She'll be so beautiful in her dress, perhaps a blue or purple. We'll write our own vows and become a holy union in the light of the Lord. I don't have any friends here yet, so, Lord, I ask that you bless me with friends. Enough to fill up the church hall and pray for my marriage. We will throw a massive party after the wedding. There will be cake and punch and games. I will throw a bouquet, and the next woman will find her other half, too. I ask that you bless me with many healthy children, and that they may never know the fear of what I'm going through. May I provide them with everything they need, and may they know you as their Savior. I hope these words show you how serious I am becoming about this man. I know that you sent him here to me. I'm not sure yet if he is for me, but I think that he is. I trust him, and I trust you, Lord. Then there's the matter of my virginity. She brought handfuls of the warm water up and let them run over her breasts. The feeling reminded her of how he had touched her. You know, I've never been the kind of Christian who believes sex is evil. Sex is given by God to man. There's a reason it feels good. I believe that form of love is worship in and of itself. I think I want this man. I want him in every way a woman should. Romantically, physically, emotionally, sexually, spiritually. If this is my other half, Lord, please give me a sign. She sunk down into the water with a sigh. If this is my other half, please give me the strength not to be afraid when he takes me. Give him a steady heart and a soft touch. She lay in the bath and remembered her old pastor's lessons on falling in love. All love was holy, but especially the romantic love between 2 people. Jalisa reflected on this until noises disturbed her meditation. Muffled by the bathroom door, Jalisa heard the sounds of room service being delivered. Taking it as her cue to join Eric, she stepped out of the bath and wrapped herself up in a towel. Jalisa dried off most of her body before taking her hair down, but she still didn't feel comfortable putting on her clothing. The thought of the tight fabric sticking to her body made her skin crawl. Is there a robe? She poked her head out of the door to find him arranging their plates on the table. A single rose in a vase sat in the middle. He must have made a special request. Her heart smiled. I quite like you in just that. He playfully growled and licked his lips before handing her a soft hotel robe. The 2 sat at the table and began to eat. He had ordered burgundy wine, glazed rib meat, green beans, and mashed potatoes. A bottle of wine and some water were chilling in a bucket of ice. Eric poured himself a glass of wine, but Jalisa refused. Jalisa arranged her silverware before bowing her head. He watched curiously before bowing his head, too. Heavenly Father, I want to thank you for the food we are about to receive. It is one of your many blessings unto man. May we use its energy in ways that uplift your name. Amen. Jalisa raised her head. Amen. Eric nodded toward her. She took a bite of her food before trying to start a conversation. The topic she wished to discuss was a sensitive one, but it was of the utmost importance to her. Do you believe in God? There was a pregnant pause between the two. Eric cringed and brought his glass to his lips, roughly gulping down the entire thing. He sighed and poured himself another drink. Jalisa was right, this would be a sensitive topic. That's not exactly an easy question to answer. It's not a simple yes or no. I wish it were, but it isn't. Eric shrugged. I don't really know the answer to that. You must have some thoughts. Jalisa put her fork down and gave him her full attention. I don't really have that pretty of a past. The concept of God gets a little murky around my brother's death. He leaned back in his chair. I don't suppose you would want to hear about that? Tell me about it.
Chapter 6. Twilight brought out the worst in people. Those who rarely woke up before sunset prowled the streets. Shadows stretched long and low around buildings and into alleyways. Men with heavy feet left icy tracks in front of the closed liquor store. Even the frost-covered ground glistened with a bit of menace. That should have been Eric's first red flag. He couldn't see it, though. He was lost in a drunken stupor and deep in conversation with his brother. Viktor Petrov. The darling child of the Petrov family. He was his mother's favorite because of his big, brown eyes. Eyes that matched his father and did not tell a tale of a cheating mother who fell into bed with the neighbor. Besides the eyes, their mother's strong genes assured they were strikingly similar. Most people even assumed they were the same age. However, they were not. Eric was 23, and Victor only 17. Not even through school yet, the boy was still trying to find his foothold in the world. He had no plans for the future, and expected Eric to give him a prime position at Eric's budding real estate company. Eric would. The boys were attached at the hip, they always had been. Old Man Winter strikes hard tonight. Victor kicked at the ground with his boot, causing a streak in the frost. Soon it will be so cold that my will freeze off. Don't speak like that, Eric scolded while trying to hide a chuckle. I do not know the English word for. Will you teach it to me? Victor tucked his hands down into his hoodie. I will not. Eric was fluent in English for his business and had been teaching Victor. You will never get a wife if you keep talking with such a dirty mouth. I do not want a wife. Victor spat on the ground. I will never take a wife. You will never get a husband either. Eric budged his younger brother with his elbow. Fuck you. Victor's heavy accent couldn't quite get the insult out. I am not gay. I like women, but I do not like wife. Wife talk all the time. Ask me to pick up after myself. It is my house. I leave my socks where I please. You should be picking up after yourself anyway. You are becoming an adult. Eric dodged it when Victor tried to shove him back. The alcohol in Victor's system made him stumble a bit before standing up. I am still drunk, Victor proclaimed. Hours had passed since he had only had a few drinks at a sports party with his brother, but the young man was showing it considerably more than Eric. Papa will be proud to have raised such a fine young alcoholic. Eric paused in front of the windows of 24-hour convenience shop. He pressed his back against the hard glass and looked down at his shadow. Their father had more than a bit of a drinking problem, even by Russian standards. It was a sore topic among their mother and father, but the two boys often made jokes. They gave their father vodka for holidays and laughed at the excitement on his face. Look at this! Victor put his hands up to the light coming from the shop and made crude gestures, watching the shadows lengthen and distort the image. "Come on," Eric fished in his pocket for a pack of cigarettes. "Sober up with a cigarette." Eric passed the pack and lighter to Victor. Had Eric been the first one to light his cigarette, things might have turned out differently. Victor placed it between his lips, lit the end, and took a deep breath. Eric glanced away for a second to reach for the lighter, and when he looked back up, a piece of his younger brother decorated his face. The lighter slipped through his fingers. The cigarette fell out of his lips and sizzled out in the snow. For more bullets fired, jerking his brother's body around in a grotesque puppet show. Eric's heart pounded and his muscles froze. He stood there looking at his brother in shock as the body kneeled and fell over with a sickening wet thud. A group of men rushed out of the convenience store and returned fire. Eric was a statue, unable to process what was happening. It wasn't until a hot bullet came dangerously close to biting into his leg that he moved. He grabbed his brother's leg and dragged him to the first place he could think of, the alleyway. Eric huddled in the garbage while Victor's body swam in ankle-deep liquid filth. Eric reached out a shaking hand and put it on his brother's body. Blood lazily slopped from the wounds on the smaller man's back. Shredded skin peeled back to expose red flesh. Eric knew from the stillness of the body and the lack of intense bleeding that his brother's heart had stopped. "Victor," he tried. The gunfire was thinning out as sirens echoed in the distance. "Victor, please." Putting a hand up to his mouth to stifle the sobs, his own brother's cooling blood smeared across his face. Hot tears ran down his cheeks and he whispered prayers. He bargained with God, saying that if he would bring back Victor, Eric would do whatever he wanted. He begged and pleaded until the police followed Victor's body's blood trail into the alley. "Do you have a weapon? Give it to me now," the cops shouted in Russian. "My brother. Please help him." Eric crawled to them. "Maybe we can save him. Get him to a hospital." The police officer made him hold up his hands and strip off his coat while another officer dragged his little brother's body away. The grief clawed its way up Eric's throat in a strangled scream. He lunged toward the body, and the police tackled him to the ground. He cried out for his brother to get up, to live, while the police shouted in his ear. In the end, the police pronounced him dead at the scene. It was later ruled a gang shooting. The men who owned the convenience store were part of some sort of mafia, and a rival gang had come to put them out of business. One of the surviving gang members testified that he shot the man outside smoking because he thought it was the owner, who happened to be a very heavy smoker. All in all, 5 men died that night, and Eric wasn't one of them. He wanted to be. The depression that set in after his brother's death was nothing short of debilitating. He lied in his brother's bed for days, just smelling his scent and crying into his pillow. He watched childhood home videos where the two frolicked around the Russian landscape. 2 brothers who were best friends. Not a care in the world. No idea that they would be separated 10 years later by a tragic shooting. One drunken night, he returned to the scene of the crime and chain-smoked the rest of the pack. His lungs burning and his mouth caked with the taste of smoke, he was sad to say he survived the night. Eric wanted to rejoin his brother, but was too afraid to do it himself. Busting into the convenience store, he demanded that they kill him. They refused. 2 days later, Eric was in the back of a truck he didn't own with a loaded gun. The truck swerved wildly all over the road, reaching triple-digit speeds. The sound of sirens and gunshots blasted in his ears. A pull of the trigger, and the police car chasing them spun out. Another pull, another police car gone. Another pull and another one. Over and over until they were home free. The rush was amazing. There was nothing quite like the thrill of getting away. It was the only thing that made him feel alive, truly alive, since seeing his brother die. The pulling of a trigger. The deliverance of vengeance. The power to inspire fear. It was an instant addiction. Originally, it had been a suicide plan, a way to end his pain without being sent straight to hell. Work in the most dangerous positions and maybe he'll end up getting shot. Next, it was about the tingle of victory shooting up his spine. Then it was about the challenge. He was damn good at his job. Wild and numb to the pain he was inflicting on others, he climbed the ranks very easily. It wasn't long before he was orchestrating his own jobs, in charge of his own men. They carved out a piece of Russia, and everyone knew it was theirs. Then, Russia wasn't big enough. Eric began coordinating international deals with Ireland and, eventually, America. It was through these trades with America that he met Stone. After moving tons and tons of drugs, covering up crimes, and protection racketeering together for about a year, the two met in New York for a weekend. It was the first time Eric had been to America. He was captivated and wished to stay in America for as long as possible. Within the next week, he was putting down money for a house. Eric couldn't pinpoint the exact moment his faith soured into a bitter agnostic nothingness. He could recall the exact moment he realized it had happened, though. Boxing things up to take with him to America, he came across the family Bible his mother had given him. Written on the inside of the front cover was a note from his mother promising him a place in her home and her heart for as long as she was alive. Tucked in between its worn-out pages was one of the only photos of them as a family. His brother's smiling face burned a hole in his heart. Eric left it sitting in a drawer in Russia. That was 6 years ago. Eric was a different person now. He no longer craved the power and the violence. He was looking for a way out, a new life. He hoped Jaleesa would be part of this new life. So far, she was shocked by his story, but did not look disgusted. "You killed people," Jaleesa said breathlessly. She sat slumped back in the chair, blinking her eyes slowly in disbelief. "Yes. Many." Eric's jaw tensed. "Not any recently, though. I no longer conduct that kind of business." "But you're still in the mafia." Jaleesa raised one slim eyebrow. "I am leaving the mafia. In fact, I will be physically leaving the mafia," Eric hinted. "I would have already left, but there is a very important woman here." "I assume you are speaking about me." Jaleesa was still in shock, and his flattery was not as effective as he wanted it to be. "Of course." He stood up from the table and made his way to her. Eric kneeled on the ground in front of her and clutched her hands in his. "I don't know what to do," she whispered. "I can't have a boyfriend who is in the mafia. I can't have a boyfriend who kills people and peddles drugs. I can't. That goes against everything I believe in, but..." She bit her full bottom lip. "But," he prodded. "It feels so right. Please, Jaleesa. Know that all my sins are in the past. I feel like we are the future. I want us to work. Please, give this relationship a chance. Give me a chance." He looked deep into her eyes. Jaleesa realized her vision was blurry before she realized that she was crying. "You have no idea what this means to me." Jaleesa sniffled. "I would love for us to be together." "Do you really mean it?" "I know mafia men can be scary, but I don't want you to think that you have to be in a relationship with me. You have free choice here. No matter if you chose to be with me or not, I swear on all I love, I will find a way to get you out of here." Eric brought her hands up to his lips and pressed one small kiss on each of her fingertips before nuzzling into her hand. You are kind and smart and handsome and generous and strong and passionate and dependable, and you make my heart thump and my hands shake, and my insides hot. Jaleesa's voice trailed off as she realized he was watching her lips move. Jaleesa, he whispered, his voice low. It would make me the happiest man in the world to kiss you right now. Unable to speak, she meekly shook her head. He waited for a moment and then he was upon her.
Hi there. Unfortunately, we've had to take this steamy scene out as it's against YouTube's terms of service.
If you don't want to miss out on love scenes in future stories, check the description and join Romancely Audio Velvet. If you're already a member, the love scene references Her Russian Millionaire, Chapter 6, Love Scene 2.
Okay, back to the story.
She pressed her head into the bed and laughed. For this moment suspended in time, everything felt okay.
Chapter 7. No one would call the street view from the Semia beautiful or picturesque, but the girls found the little 4-panel window fascinating. It gave a wealth of knowledge with just a glance. If the homeless man, Marco, was out dancing on the street, it meant that it was warm. If he was huddled in the corner, it was cold. If the liquor store was ignoring the posted closing time and serving drinks all night, then it was a holiday.
Oh no, another love scene had to be taken out due to YouTube's policies.
If you haven't already, join Romancely Audio Velvet to get love scenes for all stories.
Link to join is in the description. Pause this and do that.
It's okay, we'll wait.
If you're already a member, the love scene references Her Russian Millionaire, Chapter 7, Love Scene 3.
Signed up?
Good, now back to the story.
He took her to the movies or to a museum. They held hands and pressed sweet treats to each other's lips. From the outside, they looked completely normal. Just another couple. No one would ever suspect that he was a high-up in the mafia and she was worried about being forced into prostitution. Jaleesa's favorite spot to go to was the rose garden where they had their first date. She would collect fallen petals in a jar and write prayers in them. They discussed normal couple things like plans for the future. She wanted a kitchen painted with pastels. He wanted granite countertops. She wanted a natural pool in the backyard. He wanted a brick pizza oven. They built their dream house while sitting on a stone bench. During those times, Jaleesa would close her eyes and could almost taste the future. She wondered if they would have kids. Kids who ran around barefoot in the yard while the smell of freshly cut grass drifted throughout the air. Fresh linen on the line. Jaleesa and Eric curled up on the couch watching a DVD until one of the kids needs something. Nikita was not too thrilled, but she was supportive. Jaleesa had proclaimed her love for Eric and revealed that they were dating one night before bed. Nikita told her that was great, but the younger girl's frown told a different story. Took a few days to figure it out, but Jaleesa finally realized that she was jealous. When Jaleesa confronted her little sister, it was tense. She pried a bit too hard, but she had to make sure that Nikita didn't still have a crush on Stone. Nikita buried her face in a pillow and cried. After her sobs subsided, she admitted that she was lonely. Nikita had no one her age to play with. Everyone who came to the bar was 21 and up. Jaleesa had picked up pamphlets about sports Nikita could play, but with their schedule it was hard to work out. Jaleesa kissed her on her forehead and promised to talk to the pastor about setting up a movie trip or a play date with Nikita and Andre, his son. It was another slow night at the bar. Those were the worst. Jaleesa had already taken a meal break and taking another one would look suspicious, yet she hadn't had enough contact with Eric. She pushed off of the counter she was leaning against and mixed up another old-fashioned, this time with a splash of cherry. Ignoring Marie's prying looks, she crossed over to the end of the bar where Eric sat. This time I added a bit of cherry. She slid the new drink to him and took away the half-finished old one. His blue eyes darted around nervously before curling a hand around it. She leaned over the bar, putting her full breasts on display. He groaned. Marie is looking. His lips moved against the rim of the glass. The liquid sloshed in his mouth and he made an appreciative little noise. I know. I don't care. Jaleesa didn't even bother to glance at Marie. I want to hang out with you. Hang out? He lifted one dark eyebrow. Is that code for what we've been doing in the break room? No, she laughed, lightly swatting his suit-clad arm. It just means talk. I want to know more about you. Like what? He asked. Tell me about your mother. Or your father. She was actually interested in hearing more about his life in Russia and the possibility that he might have a Russian wife or girlfriend, but she didn't really know how to ask. My father is the easy one. He's very simple. His motto was drink and laugh until the Lord calls you back. He followed it too. A brim that was his name. Eric tipped his head back and laughed. My mother called him her Goat Abby. Goat is what women call their husbands in Russia. Maybe one day I will call you Goat Ricky. Jalisa cocked her head and flashed him her brilliant white teeth. God, no. He cringed, then quickly added, not that I don't want you to call me Goat. I just hate being called Ricky. I'll keep that in mind. Jalisa fluttered her eyelashes at him. If he expressed that he was never interested in marriage, then she would have had to think long and hard about their relationship. Jalisa didn't take such big steps like giving a man her virginity without wanting to stay by his side till death do them part. Anyway, he was a joy to be around. He was a major alcoholic, yes, but not like the fathers you see on the American TV shows. He never raised a hand to my mother or any of his children. He tried once to spank me and my brother after we had been caught with a lit cigarette on school grounds when we were about 10 or so. He couldn't do it. He never spoke about it, but my mother told us in secret that his father, my grandfather, had beaten his wife and kids. My father couldn't stand to do anything that hurt anyone after growing up in that. Eric took another long swig of his drink. Did you ever meet your grandfather? You speak about him like you don't know him, she said. Jalisa thought about her own grandfathers. On her mother's side, she had no clue who he was or anything about him other than he was monoracial passing mixed man who was mostly black with a little bit of something else. He came from a time where interracial relationships were taboo, and his race was not something he openly told people upon meeting them. Jalisa never got close enough to find out about it, even though his blood ran through her veins and meant she was slightly mixed. On her father's side, her grandfather had died before she was born in a car accident. All she had of him were stories and a few pictures. I never met him. Okay, that's a lie. I saw him once before he died. He was out walking around the streets of Russia in his underwear, screaming at children and throwing rocks at people. Apparently, he was diabetic and had been refusing medication for so long that his blood sugar was near 800. I saw it on the news and then later on social media. Eric shrugged. This was before I had immigrated to America and obtained dual citizenship, so he's probably dead by now. What was your mother like? I remember that she told you to say she was your best friend, so that I would fall in love with you. Jalisa giggled, the feeling of love blossoming inside of her and reducing her to a lovesick schoolgirl. My mother was a complex woman. She was extremely proud and independent. Her first husband said that she could not buy a house she wanted, so she worked hard and bought it her damn self. At other times, she was soft. I would often lay awake in my bed as a child and listen to the muffled sobs coming through the walls. I knew without getting up that she would be sitting at the kitchen table, a cup of tea and a mountain of crumpled tissues in front of her. I assume she mostly cried about money. We were just another poor family in Russia, struggling to make ends meet. Put a lot of pressure on her. Sometimes my father's voice could be heard comforting her. The only times he would not comfort her is when he was too drunk to do so. He most likely would have passed out on the couch. I think they had a happy marriage. I never saw them fight and I only heard them fight through walls about money. My father would drink up the water bill and we would have to collect snow and boil it to bathe for school and church. My father was goofy and would just make it into a joke or assure her that it was just money and they could make more of it. My favorite memory of my mother happened when I was about 12. We were very poor and it got a lot worse in winter. That November, my brother and I tried to save up money to get her a Mother's Day present. There was this little locket she had been eyeing in the department store. It was fake silver and fake rhinestones, but it was still too much for her to buy for herself. My brother and I made a pact to not eat lunch at school and save up our lunch money for it. The problem was that we were growing boys, and we ended up caving and eating every day. My brother and I would sit on the bus going home and show each other how much money we had saved. It was never more than what would equal $1, but we kept at it. We ate some scraps from our friends and shoveled a few driveways. I wish we had had a camera to capture the look on my mother's face. She cycled through emotions faster than anyone I had ever seen. She was shocked, then delighted, then angry. She thought we had stolen it. She was furious, demanding we go back and apologize to the manager. Through tears, my brother and I explained that we had not been eating, and she cried. We got the biggest hug I have ever seen, and one swat on the bum for not eating. He ran a pale, slim finger around the rim of his glass while he spoke. She wore it every day from then on. When I video chat with her, she is always wearing it. It has been repaired so many times that the repair cost far outweighs the cost of just getting her a new necklace. But she won't have it. Could I meet her? Jaleesa asked. On video chat, of course. She doesn't speak English. He rubbed his chin. But I suppose I could translate for you too. Jaleesa was just about to ask her question about the possibility of a Russian wife or lover when Marie and Stone butted in. The two stood too close for comfort and glared rather aggressively at the two. Marie gave them a sickly sweet smile. Hey guys. Her voice was being more and more annoying each time Jaleesa heard it. I'm so glad you guys are getting along so well. Having friends is sure to help Jaleesa settle in easier. Don't worry, Marie. You'll still be my best friend. Jaleesa was just as fake as Marie. The two girls laughed together. Hey, Eric. I got something I want to discuss with you. In the other room, Stone grunted. Everyone present looked around at each other, gauging each other's reaction to the loaded situation they were in. All right. Eric pushed his almost empty glass toward Marie. Will you keep this safe? Jaleesa made it special with cherries. Sure. Marie set it behind the bar. A new bruise wrapped around her wrist showed Jaleesa that she had been fighting with Stone some more. Jaleesa watched with a heavy heart as Stone and Eric disappeared into the break room. The same room that Eric and Jaleesa had become intimate in not very long ago. She had no idea what they were going to talk about, but she didn't have a good feeling about it. Marie placed one manicured hand on her shoulder. Want to go shopping later? Marie always wanted to go out with Jaleesa. Jaleesa kept a neutral face while she weighed the options. On one hand, she wanted to be as far away from Marie as possible. On the other hand, Marie had to think positively of Jaleesa so she would not get suspicious. So long as we aren't out too late, Jaleesa said. Marie started chatting about new winter fashions and who was wearing what on the red carpet. Jaleesa picked up a rag and started wiping down the bar, occasionally giving an aha or an oh really. The crash was barely audible over the sound of the music. Jaleesa and a few customers sitting about looked in the direction of the break room. Eric threw open the door and stormed out of the building without a word. He wiped at something on his face and didn't even glance at Jaleesa. She walked a few steps toward him before she halted. Marie's eyes burned holes into the back of her head. You seem awfully interested in Eric. Marie's voice was low. What's the reason for that? I mean, wouldn't you be worried if someone ran out of the room? Jaleesa tried to play it off coolly while her heart beat out of her chest. I'm mostly interested in him because he's Stone's boss and what happens to him falls down the chain of command and lands on my lap. I could see that. Marie drummed her nails on the hard wood of the bar counter, fingers moving so quickly they blurred into a single harsh noise. He's cute, isn't he? I guess. Jaleesa returned back to scrubbing down the already spotless bar. So, what were you telling me about flannels? Oh, flannels are the worst and they always get popular near winter. I don't get it, especially for girls. Why would you want to look like a lumberjack? Not that lumberjacks aren't sexy, but I wouldn't marry one. I'd sleep with one like once. That's enough lumberjack for me. Thank you very much. Oh, that reminds me. Did you read the latest issue of Women's Journal? There was this article called 10 Signs You Know He's a Leo that I thought was spot fucking on. Marie continued to talk at Jaleesa rather than talking with her. It kept on in much the same fashion until Jaleesa asked if she could be let off work early for a stomachache. She sat upstairs on the couch and watched Nikita play video games. Now, she was playing something about dragons that was a little too violent for Jalisa's taste. A towel in front of her had scissors, a spray bottle, and a pile of discarded hair. Her long fingers worked in her hair, carefully undoing her twists. Messing with her hair was her nervous habit. Seeing Eric run out like that had made her so upset she was completely redoing her hair. Section by section, her hair bounced out into its natural state. She pulled it down and held it straight against her body and found it laid all the way down to her breasts. Her twists had gone all the way down to mid-back. After being kept in one protective style after another, it was getting a bit too long for Jalisa's liking. "I'm gonna cut my hair," she murmured to Nikita. "I think you look the best with it long, but it's your body." Nikita laughed as her character back flipped off of a mountain. "Eric ran off today, just ran out of the bar. He still hasn't come back. Didn't even look at me." Jalisa sent up a silent prayer for him, wherever he was. God would know. "That explains it." Nikita frowned. "I'm sure he'll be fine." Eric didn't return to the bar in the morning. After lunch, Jalisa put her hair into a couple afro puffs and went shopping with Marie. Although she wanted to get lingerie, she didn't want Marie to catch on. In the end, she settled for some new jeans and couple tops that were deep blue and vivid green to accentuate the jewel tones in her skin. They stopped by a salon and Jalisa got her hair cut in her favorite natural shape. A deep part to the side with coils filling out her crown. He didn't return the next day or the next or the next. A week passed by with no sign of Eric. Jalisa's worry settled into a deep sadness that rested in the pit of her stomach. A mean part of her brain whispered to her that he had run off to be with his Russian wife. Her mind conjured up images of a stunning skinny white girl with glowing blue eyes. After 9 days and a couple of dodged questions from Marie, she became worried again. He had promised her that he would help her find a way out of this mess. He said she had at least 2 weeks to get out before Stone really started to trap her into sex work. If he wanted to break up, fine, but he could at least warn her that she would have to find a way out on her own. Her meager savings under her bed totaled around $2,000. It was enough to get them a down payment on an apartment and start up a few utilities. It was not nearly enough to start a whole new life. Marie had put her in contact with a man who made fake paperwork for people in a bad situation, and he wanted at least $1,000 to do all the paperwork: driver's license, birth certificate, social security card, the whole shebang for Nikita and her. "Hey, Stone." She approached him tentatively. "I was wondering if I could get an advancement on my next few paychecks." "Maybe." He raised an eyebrow, his face giving away nothing. "May I ask why?" "I want to send Nikita to the orthodontist." She lied. It was a good lie, well thought out and practiced. Originally, it was for Nikita to go to private school, but she was afraid Stone would want to know where. Orthodontists were expensive and hardly no one remembered their names. "Oh," his face softened. "Are her teeth not okay?" "They look pretty, but they're painful." Jalisa forced her facial features to look sad. "Her teeth look fine from the front, but in the back they are really bad. Crowded up and twisted around." Stone gave her a look of deep concentration. Jalisa bit the inside of her lip and figured she needed to lie better. When she was younger, it was worse. There were days when she couldn't eat solid foods. "I still remember my dad running out to get more soup at all hours of the night when she would wake up hungry and hurting from her teeth." Jalisa felt bad for lying like this, and even worse for involving her sister and father, but it was necessary.
Chapter 8. Church was the only thing that kept Jalisa rooted in reality. Nikita and she went every chance they got. Being surrounded by people and being uplifted by faith made the loneliness from Eric's disappearance a little easier to bear. Stone had lent them the money, another $1,000. Jalisa immediately sent it off to the man who would forge their documents for them. Nikita had been sneaking and using Stone's laptop to look up apartments in the area. There was one that was not too far from here for only $500 down and $300 a month, Nikita whispered to Jalisa as the two laid side by side in bed. "There are 2 problems with that one. 1, we should probably move further away. 2. Anything that cheap is probably not that safe. Though Stone and Marie probably could not hear them, the two girls kept their voices low. Should we go to a new city? Nikita reached over and grabbed her sister's hand. Is that an option? Probably not. Jaleesa squeezed the comforting weight in her palm. I don't have to tell you how hard it was to start over. We don't have enough money to make another trip like the one from home to Los Angeles. How are we going to get out of this mess? Eric said we had about 2 weeks to get out before Stone started lining up customers for you, right? It's been 2 weeks. Nikita's voice hitched, and Jaleesa's stomach dropped. She hated seeing her sister cry. It has took a lot of deliberation, but Jaleesa finally decided to tell Nikita the whole truth, every little bit. From Stone's plan to make her into a prostitute to Marie's betrayal to Stone and Eric's fight, Nikita knew about it all. She had even told her little sister that she had given her virginity to Eric and planned to stay with him for a long time. Maybe we can stay at a homeless shelter? They're run by the government, right? They can protect us, Nikita said naively. That's going to be the first place they check. Plus, Los Angeles has one of the highest rates of homelessness in the United States. I doubt that we would be able to just walk in and get a place to stay. Not to mention that anything government-funded requires for us to have a social security number. One that won't be tracked back home and land us in deep trouble. Jaleesa sighed. All right, how long will the guy take to make our papers? They are real, aren't they? They can be used to do things like get help at the homeless shelter or sign up for free lunch, right? Nikita said. The mention of free and reduced lunch at school made Jaleesa feel guilty. It was winter, Nikita should be learning and playing with her friends, not worrying about whether or not her sister would choose rape or homelessness. We won't really know until we try. Jaleesa was scared that they wouldn't work, but, then again, what part of her life wasn't scary? They took a few 20s out of their savings to take a taxi to church and back and also have some to put in the offering plate. The preacher spoke on being fulfilled in the Lord and about never losing sight of what was important. Everything on this earth and in this lifetime was temporary, and the kingdom of God is what was really important. She exited the church feeling refreshed and renewed. Once again, her determination to do anything to get Nikita and herself out of this situation was aflame. In the distance, a broad-shouldered, dark-haired man stood in the parking lot next to a car that looked a lot like Eric's. He turned around and made eye contact with Jaleesa. Bright blue eyes teeming with curiosity. It was him. Oh, her beating heart be still. It was him. Jaleesa ran to him and embraced him with all she had, onlookers be damned. He stiffened for a moment, then relaxed into her hug. Her arms thrown around his neck and his wrapped around her waist, they had a moment right there in the church parking lot. Where were you? She cried. I was starting to think you had abandoned me. I'm so sorry, beautiful. He squeezed her. It wasn't me, it was Stone. He threatened to kill us both if I didn't leave you alone. I was struggling so hard with what to do that I decided to stop by my old church. I didn't go in because I was afraid I wouldn't be welcome, he murmured in her ear. I can't stand it anymore. She held him close. We have to escape. You were going to take a taxi back? Yes. He waited until she nodded to continue. Get in my car. I lied earlier when I said I didn't have a home. It's kind of a hub for mafia activity, so I didn't want you to be a part of it. I will take you and Nikita there and we can plan your escape. Jaleesa wanted to be offended because of his lie, but she understood he was just trying to protect her. The two girls got in his car and drove about 20 minutes to his home. It was unassuming, just another basic home with 2 stories and 4 windows. A tiny yard with a chain-link fence stretched around the perimeter housed 2 dogs, 1 chocolate lab and 1 Rottweiler. They jumped up, tails wagging a million miles per minute at the sight of their owner returning. Eric had 3 security systems and a guard disguised as an old man sitting on the porch. Eric addressed him in Russian, and the man took his hand out of his blanket. It settled back over his legs and Jalisa could just barely make out the shape of a large firearm. Jalisa held Nikita close as they walked inside. This mafia business was testing her trust in Eric, but the Lord would protect her and her sister. "These are my men, and you have nothing to fear." Eric could feel the tension in the room. "If any of them bothers you, you let me know and he will be dealt with. I will not be the cause of another human being's death." "Absolutely not. I refuse to take part in such a horrid thing," Jalisa said. "I didn't mean that. This isn't the movies. I would fire him." Eric opened the door to a room that was filled with lights. A vintage Pac-Man machine sat blinking in the corner. Various mini-fridges decorated with famous drink brands collected next to it. The main attraction was the giant TV and the set of consoles and games underneath it. "Oh, wow," Nikita gasped. She ran and started pressing buttons on the gaming consoles. "Nikita," Jalisa scolded. "Did you ask permission to do that?" "No, ma'am." Nikita lowered her eyes and spoke to Eric. "May I play with your toys?" "Yes, you may, Nikita. Your sister and I are going to my room to discuss some business." Eric turned to Jalisa. "If your sister is okay with that? You give me your word that these men will not harm my sister?" Jalisa asked. "Of course. I have a few female employees who can come and sit with Nikita if that would make you feel better." Eric smiled at her. "That would make me more comfortable." She bit her lip. He was becoming more and more handsome by the second and she was going up to his bedroom. Eric snapped his fingers and said something in Russian. 2 men standing at the door got up and left. Jalisa waited until 3 women entered the room and took their seats near Nikita. One of the women was black and dressed casually in a sports t-shirt. If it wasn't for her age and the gun strapped to her hip, Jalisa would assume she was one of Nikita's friends from back home. As they walked up the stairs, Jalisa was not under any false impressions. She knew exactly what was going to happen once she was in his room, and it wasn't making plans. That would happen, of course, but much later. Right now she needed him to claim her over and over, to burn his name into her lips once again. He opened the door and let her inside the brightly lit room. She glanced around only to locate the plush bed topped with velvet blankets.
"Hi again. Unfortunately, there was another adult scene here which we've had to take out."
If you're a member of Romancely Audio Velvet, you can log in and hear it now. The love scene references Her Russian Millionaire, Chapter 8, Love Scene 4.
If you're not yet a Romancely Audio Velvet member, check the description to join now. Okay, back to the story.
It was a sloppy mess to clean up, but, luckily, Eric had an adjoining bathroom in his room. When their skin and sheets were clean and dry, they cuddled together, Jalisa wrapped up in his arms. "You could stay here," he whispered. "Nikita, too, of course." "Of course," she answered. "But you mentioned something about this being a hub for the mafia. What exactly goes on here?" "Distribution, mainly, and storage. Don't go prowling around down there, but you know the room you first step into when entering from the employee's door," he said. "The one with all the storage crates?" She waited until he nodded. "Yes, I know it. One of those crates is empty. When you open it up, the bottom is removed and a trapdoor is under there. Inside the trapdoor is a hole underground to the semia. It's set up as a drug and illegal alcohol manufacturing ring. He paused. We're living above that? Jalisa gawked. We have to get Nikita out of there. But you said they store the stuff here? Yes. The product is kept here where it is packaged and sent out to wherever it needs to go. Most of it stays in Los Angeles or California, but some goes as far as Ireland. I do have another idea. Let's hear it, Jalisa said. No matter what, she would not have Nikita living somewhere with drugs present. Too many people have fallen into the devil's hands because of chemical addiction. You and Nikita go back to the Semia, pack up all of your belongings, and flee. We stay the night at a hotel so that you two aren't around mafia business. In the morning, we go to an apartment in another city and put down money for it. I'll give you a good reference from the bar I technically own and you can get a job. We'll move forward from there. He held her close. But our IDs, she said. A man Marie put me in touch with is making us fake documents for us to start a new life. If we run before he's done with them, we will have to find someone else to make them. I don't have those kind of connections. I do. Don't worry about the IDs. We'll figure it out. The most important thing is that we get you and Nikita out of there as soon as possible. He reached over to his nightstand and grabbed his phone. After pressing a few buttons, he showed Jalisa a hotel room on the screen. I'm making a reservation here. You check in at the hotel under my name. I'll call them ahead of time to make sure they know that you are coming so they won't give you any trouble. I'll meet you the following morning and we'll run away together. An hour later, Jalisa and Nikita were back at the Semia. Jalisa had briefed Nikita on the plan in the car. They tried to act natural as they walked in, even stopping to make small talk with Marie. After Jalisa lied and said she had to go upstairs and take a bath before work, the two girls shut themselves in their room. It was hard deciding what to take. The things they came in with were going with them, of course, but what of the stuff Marie bought them? Some of the things, like the nightstand, were too bulky or heavy to take with them, but Jalisa felt it was a shame to leave the smaller items. After all, Marie bought them for Jalisa and Nikita with no intention of having Jalisa pay her back. In the end, the girls stuffed their packs with the clothing Marie bought them. With everything packed up and ready to go, it was time to depart. Throwing on winter coats, the girls kneeled next to their beds and prayed. Dear Heavenly Father, we pray that you will allow this plan to go smoothly and shield us with your hand. Jalisa paused for Nikita to pick up where she left off. Guide us with your will and show us the true path laid out before us. Protect us and help us stay safe and happy. Nikita's voice sounded mature for her age when she prayed. Bless us and bless Eric for helping us. May he find his way back to you. Amen. Jalisa brought her head up. Amen. Nikita followed suit and they exited their room, hand in hand. It was too dangerous to go out the front door where Stone or Marie might see them, so the two descended down the steps. Jalisa looked intently at the storage crates, trying to figure out which one was different. It didn't matter now that they were getting out, but she was still curious. In the back on the left-hand side, one crate sat lower than the others, its bottom slats removed. She made a mental note of where it was just in case. Turning to the door where Nikita was waiting nervously, Jalisa pulled out her nail-polish-painted keys and attempted to open the set of locks. The locks were color-coded as well so that people with keys could get in and out easier, but these locks were bright silver and gold. There wasn't a patch of peeling nail polish in sight. Shivers going up her spine, a large hand clamped around her mouth.
Chapter 9. Nikita was the first one to make noise. She screamed bloody murder and started kicking at Stone's feet. He smothered Jalisa harder, his bulging muscles pressing down her chest. She clawed at his hand, but it was useless. Nikita used all the strength in her little 90-pound body to tug at Stone's arm. He hissed and a line of bright red blood rose up from where Nikita's nails had been. Bitch! He threw Jalisa into a storage crate. Pain exploded on her side and the breath was literally knocked out of her lungs. He lunged for Nikita. The small girl managed to slip away, but her backpack didn't. He grabbed hold of it and raised one fist. Horror flashed through her eyes, and Nikita cringed away, shielding herself with her hands. Jalisa ran on pure instinct, jumping on his back to prevent him from striking her sister. They tumbled backward into a crate. Stone's massive body landed on top of Jalisa. Her head hit something hard. Marie's voice could be heard in the distance. Nikita screamed again, this time calling out for help. Stone wiggled off of her. Pain on the side of her head. The edges of things were black and fuzzy. She blinked heavily. Her body was being picked up. She cracked open her eyes just enough to see Marie and Nikita struggling. Though skinny, Nikita was only 90 pounds and Marie undoubtedly weighed more. Nikita put up a good fight. Marie stumbled once or twice, her heels slipping on the floor. There was a bang. Her foot hurt. She could taste copper. Hey! Stone smacked her face lightly. Jalisa's eyes remained closed. That's not how you do it. You have to squirt water on her face. Marie's voice bounced around in Jalisa's head uncomfortably. Well, will this work? Stone asked. Do I look like a doctor? Marie bit. In the background, Nikita could be heard sobbing. You seem to know a lot about it just a second ago. Stone's voice came closer to her. Fuck off, Marie said. Stone grunted in response. That seemed to be the end of it. Something warm drizzled on Jalisa's face. It caused pain to blossom around her forehead. She groaned, and the sour liquid slipped into her mouth. She coughed a few times before her eyes fluttered open. Stone held a half-empty beer can a few inches away from her. Gross. Jalisa sat up too quickly and the world tilted on its axis. She reached out without thinking about it and grabbed onto Stone's shirt for support. Whoa now. Looks like you're warming up to me quite quickly. Stone set the beer can down and leaned in for a kiss. Jalisa turned her head with a cry and his lips brushed her beer-stained cheek. He growled and shoved her back down on the floor. That's fine. You'll warm up soon enough. Leave her alone. Nikita's tiny voice shook with terror. Jalisa rolled her head over to her and was shocked by what she saw. Nikita was tied to the leg of a table with rope. Marie sat on the couch next to her, drinking something with a high alcohol content. She's right. Men don't like it when the merchandise comes pre-roughed up. Marie paused in her drinking just long enough to get that out before resuming. I'm not merchandise, Jalisa spoke up. Not looking like that, honey. Marie made a motion to her forehead and Jalisa repeated it. Her fingertips dipped into sticky wet blood, red and fresh. Something had cut her forehead open. You need to get her to stop that damn crying. Stone turned from Marie to yell at Nikita. Before I lose my fucking patience. You're not going to get away with this. Jalisa started to stand up, but Stone pushed her back down. There was no telling how much blood she lost. Not that she was a great fighter in the first place. Get away with it? What do you mean? Stone laughed. I'm simply hiring you as an employee. I refuse. Jalisa sat up and scooted back until she hit the couch. Stone leaned forward, an evil glint in his eye. Oh? Then should we get the police involved? Stone's haughty tone was out of place with his sentence. The police would be on Jalisa's side, right? Surely, her testimony against him would be enough to put him away. Not to mention that he had just assaulted her. Getting the police involved is a great idea. Jalisa ground her teeth. Are you sure? Because by my count, you've stolen thousands of dollars from me and Marie. I'm sure the police would love to hear about how an unemployed and homeless woman is wearing such nice clothes. He grabbed her backpack and dumped it out. Thousands of dollars in a sock and hundreds of dollars of clothes tumbled out. The realization of what he meant hit her in the face harder than he himself had. Huh? What's this? He opened up the sock and pulled out the rolled-up wad of cash. This looks a whole lot like my money. That's my paycheck. I worked hard for it. I'm not unemployed. Jalisa pulled her knees up to her chest. It was a defensive pose that made her feel better. Oh, where's your paperwork? Your tax form? Paychecks? You don't have any of that, right? Because you couldn't open a bank account because you're on the run. Getting paid under the table has its drawbacks. Ha! Stone cocked his head. I'm sure the police would waste no time in responding to my call once I tell them that I have a kidnapped child with me. You are the only one holding me against my will. Nikita wiggled hard in her bonds and Marie placed a heavy hand on her shoulder. I'm not the one who dragged you across the country. I bet I can find an Amber Alert for Nikita online just by searching her name. Call the tip line, and I've got 2 police departments working for me. Stone stood up and withdrew a pocket knife from his back pocket. Jalisa closed her eyes, moving her lips in a silent prayer. No, 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 Nikita chanted. Jalisa crawled over toward her and watched as Stone sawed through her ropes. She wanted to grab Nikita and run, but Stone was holding a knife way too close to Nikita for Jalisa to make a move. Take her into your room. Stone jerked hard on the rope and forced Nikita to her feet before handing her off to Marie. The woman clacked her way across the tiles with Nikita in tow. You're coming with me. Stone reached toward her and for a moment she thought he was going to grab her hair. Instead, his fingers dug into her shoulder and hauled her to her feet. Jalisa's stomach rolled. Stone forced her into his room and threw her onto the bed. He slammed the door shut and left her all alone. It was the first time she had ever been in his room. The most noticeable thing was the smell. Marijuana and smelly feet. Several bottles of pills sat on his nightstand, none of them prescribed to him. An ashtray full of cigarette butts lingered next to a window. She opened it, only to find it was too far of a drop for her to safely make it. She considered screaming for help, but Stone would hear her. Jalisa rifled through his things, looking for anything that could help her. She mainly wanted a phone, but she would even take a weapon at this point. Among piles of dirty laundry that made her skin crawl to touch, she found several interracial fetish magazines. Images of women like her being tied up and choked filled the glossy pages. She shivered in disgust and threw them away from her. Under his bed sat another stack of the magazines and an unassuming shoebox. She pulled it out, figuring that was the place he was most likely to find a weapon. Inside were photographs of nude women performing various sexual acts on Stone. Many of them were a place Jalisa could identify as parts of the bar. Some of them showed Marie in situations that shocked Jalisa to her core. They were all labeled with the women's name, the date, and a few words about why she was doing this. Most of them were needs money for, but a few of them were tragic. Jalisa figured Stone meant to put her naked body in a box, too. There was a thump on the wall and Jalisa jumped. She hurriedly stuffed the box back under the bed, all the while glancing over her shoulder in case someone was about to come in and find her snooping. She pressed her ear up to a hole in the wall where the thump came from and was able to hear into the other room. The hole had a strip of duct tape over it that was so worn out it was hardly even sticky anymore. Glancing through it, she was able to see a flash of Marie walking by. Stone had a peephole into Marie's room. You better calm down. He's not afraid to kill everybody in here, himself included, Marie said, her voice very muffled but audible. Help us. If you're so afraid of him, then help us. Nikita's tiny hand was seen reaching toward Marie. I would if I could, baby doll. Marie sighed. If there's one thing I know for sure, it's that you can't fight against Stone. It just doesn't work. Lord only knows how my life would have turned out if I never met him. Just call the police. Please, I'm begging you. Nikita grabbed onto Marie. It's no use thinking about that now. Did I ever tell you what my childhood was like? Marie ignored Nikita's begging and continued on with her introspection. The door opened, and Jalisa pushed the tape back over the hole and jumped onto the bed. She tried to look innocent. Stone walked in with a washcloth that was dripping all over the floor. He pressed the warm rag to her face and rubbed it around in rough circles. Her hands dug into the blankets. She could have asked to clean her own face herself, but it was probably best to let Stone do what he wants right now. Look, I know you hate me and all, But I promise that I'm not such a bad guy. Marie hated me at first, too. But now she fucks me for fun. One day you will, too. Stone patted the dried beer and blood from her face. I promise you that Marie is broken. She didn't realize that you're that bad of a guy. You just broke her. Jalisa bit her lip after she said it, not knowing how he would react. Anger flared in his eyes before he looked away, jaw tensing. You'll be working tonight. His voice was ice. By that, I assume you'll have a stranger rape me for money? She asked. Tears pricked in her eyes. No. Well, yes. Maybe. He paused. If that's what they're into. Some of them like the nice and gentle stuff, so you pretend to be a schoolgirl or a virgin or something. Some of them like the sexy in-control type of thing, so become a temptress and a succubus. Some of them like the unwilling stuff, so you play the victim. I'm going to puke. She put her head between her knees and recited Psalm 23 verse 4. Yeah, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. Will you give it a rest? Stone sighed. Now, you're going to be taking half of Marie's customers tonight. Had you not tried to escape, you would be taking your own this weekend. I had some good guys picked out for you. Simple wedding fantasy. Nothing too rough. But now you went and pissed me off by making my life harder. So now I've got to make your life harder, too. You get that? You see how this is all your fault. I didn't ask for this. She untucked her head. You'll be taking Marvin and AJ. Stone stood up. He walked to the door and paused before opening it. I hope they don't go too easy on you. You'll need a rough breaking in now. Jalisa curled up on the bed and prayed until noises from the other room drew her attention. Stone entered Marie's room and told her to go and get Jalisa ready. Jalisa prayed for a few minutes for Nikita's safety until Marie came in, her facial expression as wobbly as her high heels. If it makes you feel any better, most of the girls that we have connected with paying customers have been willing. Marie paused, looking away from Jalisa's eyes. Well, more willing than you. Most of them were addicts who needed a fix. That doesn't make me feel better. Jalisa pushed herself into the corner of Stone's smelly bed. I have to get you ready for your first customer. Marie motioned for her to get up. Come on. I have to show you how to bathe like a real prostitute does before work. Jalisa followed Marie to the bath. She glanced at the door, but Marie warned her to not even think about. There was no telling what Stone would do to Nikita if Jalisa didn't participate. The women entered the bathroom and Marie shut the door. Jalisa thought about knocking Marie out, but Marie warned her of the same thing. Jalisa had stripped in front of someone only a few times in her adult life. There was her doctor when she was receiving a physical. There was Nikita when they shared a room. There was Eric when they were making love. This didn't feel like any of those times. Marie refused to turn around, saying she would have to get used to her private parts not being so private anymore. Jalisa toed out of her shoes and socks first in a thinly veiled attempt to give herself more time to adjust to what was happening. She folded her socks and put them in the corner. Sadistically, Marie forced her to strip down completely before even plugging up the tub and turning on the water. I know it seems like I'm being hard on you, but trust me, you'll thank me later. Marie stuck her hand under the water and then cranked it up to maximum hot. I had a woman who brought me into this lifestyle just like I'm doing for you. She did the same things for me and I thought her cruel at the time. It helped me down the road. It's easier to have your humanity stripped bare in front of only one other woman and not have it ripped off by a group of men. Is there any way out of this? Please, I'll do anything. Jalisa was shaking so hard her knees were knocking together. Girls have been asking that question since men figured out they can make money from our lady parts. Marie ran one manicured finger over the surface of the water. Her eyes flashed to Jalisa and Jalisa understood. At least tell me how I can make this easier on myself. Stone said I was to service? Entertain? I don't know the polite word for it. I was supposed to be with Marvin and AJ. Jalisa dipped her toe into the scalding hot bath water before yanking it out. You have to bathe in water as hot as possible. You'll start to crave it that way after a while. Makes you feel clean. Marie took off her heels and threw them over next to Jalisa's discarded clothing. As for Marvin and AJ, you're going to have trouble with Marvin. Why? Jalisa made herself shin-deep in the water for a moment before kneeling down. He's kind of weird. Marie pulled out a tube of body oil and dumped some in the bath along with a salt soak. His fetishes change every week, so I can't really give you any forewarning on what it might be. The only thing he consistently enjoys are blowjobs and touching feet. And AJ. Jalisa kneeled in the water. He always does a breaking and entering fantasy. Typically, you sit in a chair facing away from him and put on a necklace and pretend to put on makeup, then he grabs you from behind. You struggle. He throws you onto the bed and has his way with you. I always use it as a chance to freshen up my lipstick. You're gonna want to watch out because he gets pretty rough. Just try to rub your clit a lot and put a bunch of lube inside of you beforehand. Do that with every customer. Nothing hurts worse than a man going in dry. I really don't want to do that. Jalisa sunk into the water, the harsh heat being twistedly soothing. You're really going to regret having your hair that way. It's a target. Men will grab it and some may rip some out. You're going to want to get it as silky as possible and soon. Marie handed her some soap and let her start lathering herself up. I can't really get it as smooth as yours in a snap of a finger. Jalisa thought about how long it would take to relax her hair and style it before considering just wearing a wig that wasn't secure. If a man pulled too hard on it, it would come off and maybe he would be satisfied with that. Over the next hour, Jalisa was scrubbed, shaved, moisturized, and had a pound of makeup applied. She hated to admit it, but she looked good. Marie had stuck on fake eyelashes and given her a ruby smoky eyes with wings so sharp it could cut a man. The cut on her forehead was covered with a bandage that was disguised with makeup. Marie said that that was how she never looked injured. Marie wrapped her up in a towel and sent her outside. Stone was waiting on the couch and rose upon seeing her. He walked over to her with a look of determination. Can I free peek? They always give me a free peek. Stone started to reach for the towel, but, thankfully, Marie spoke up. You leave her alone now. I've got her all prepared and you're going to ruin it. Marie walked out with Jalisa's clothing in her arms. She thrust it into Stone's chest. Why don't you go put these in the laundry room and I'll get her into some lingerie? Surprisingly, the room where this would take place was not on the upstairs floor. Clad only in a towel, Jalisa made her way downstairs with Marie. She was nervous about someone seeing her, but also hoping some random bar patron would put two and two together and call the police. The bar room was empty and there was a chain wrapped around the door handle from the inside. Jalisa figured this wasn't to keep people out, but to keep her in. Marie led her into a room near the break room that Jalisa was led to believe was unused. Stone told her it just housed pipes and a water heater. It was instead set up like a porn room set. Dark blue walls, black laminate flooring, and shelves of sex toys. In the middle was a huge bed. A chair sat inconspicuously in the corner, but Jalisa knew what it was for. Soon AJ would be pulling her out of it in the middle of his home invasion fantasy. Marie walked over to a squat little dresser and pulled out some red-hot lingerie. Here, she laid it out on the bed. Jalisa had no idea what the name of this scrap of lace was, let alone how to put it on. Marie helped her into it. The red lace corset required two people anyway. Jalisa put her hands up against the wall as Marie squeezed the breath right out of her. The outfit was completed with a tiny pair of black panties and black thigh highs with garter belts. Now, there's a board of sanded wood underneath the bed. If he wants to pretend to fuck you somewhere hard, like on a road or chained up in his basement, have him pull it out and put it on the bed. You can place a thin blanket over it to prevent splinters. Marie gave her one last look and pulled her in for a hug. Jalisa's eyes welled with tears, and she tilted her head back to keep them in her eyes. This was reality now. All that was left to do was wait for First Man.
Chapter 10. His coffee was getting cold. Eric pushed it away and checked his phone one more time. No new calls. No new messages. Nothing. He gestured for the waitress to bring him another coffee before stepping outside to make a call. Front desk? How may I help you? A woman's voice answered. He had the front desk of the hotel on speed dial. I need to see if my girlfriend has checked into our room yet. He tried not to sound worried. Of course. What name is the reservation under? Soft typing echoed through the line. Eric Petrov. Erikpetrov. As an immigrant, he had gotten used to having to spell out his name. She hasn't checked in, yet. The woman paused. Is there anything else I can help you with, Mr. Petrov? No, thank you. Eric hung up and went back into the diner. His coffee sat at his table, and he poured cream and sugar in it before taking a sip. Pinching the bridge of his nose, he knew he couldn't just sit here and drink coffee. There was no way she would take 3 hours to pack. 10 minutes later, he had a plan. Eric zipped back home, breaking the speed limit many times. The sun hung lazily in the sky, ushering in twilight. A light rain pattered down from the heavens. There was no telling where Jolisa was, who was with her, and what was happening. All he knew was that Jolisa would not skip out on him, no matter what. The guard disguised as an old man nodded at him when he zipped in. Jogging up the steps, he paused and looked over at him. It was a long shot that the man had seen anything, but his post did give him a good view of the road, and it was probably better if Eric covered all his bases. Did Jolisa come by here? Eric asked. The black girl? The man said before he remembered he was speaking to his boss. No, sir. Ms. Jolisa did not come by here. Even if she did, I wouldn't have let her past. No one gets by me and my Beretta. No, sir. I don't have time to dissect everything that is wrong with what you just said. I'll leave it at this: if you ever shoot or threaten Jolisa in any way, I will flay your flesh off of your body in the worst way possible. Eric tilted his head down and spoke with a heavy Russian accent. Now, I will ask you one more question, Jolisa or no, have you seen anything unusual going on? No, sir. He lowered his head. Eric brushed past him, no longer having a use for this conversation. He stomped around, yelling in Russian at his men to rally. With his anxiety building, he descended to the basement. He hadn't been the demon he was in the mafia in a long time. Eric pushed that part of himself down, but as he reached the bottom step, he felt that part of him rise up and cloak him like a shroud. The basement was the center of their operations. Walls lined with guns glinted in the light. Storage crates identical to the ones in the Semia clustered in the middle. Men crowded around them with crowbars, loudly prying up their tops to reveal their contents. Bulletproof vest, brand new. It had been a long time since he himself was in the middle of the action, but only he could do this. I want 6 good men ready to go in 10 minutes. He shrugged out of his suit jacket and strapped on a vest. The familiar weight brought him back and he smiled devilishly. 6 of his best men fell in line at the door. They stood with their feet apart, weapons down at their sides, and their eyes facing forward. Eric felt like a military commander as he walked up and down their ranks. 3 from Russia. 3 from the US. All trained by the mafia and ready to attack at a moment's notice. Men, Eric barked. I do not know what has happened. The only information I have is that the love of my life has not checked into our hotel. Now, I know that in and of itself does not mean that something bad has happened or requires such an intense response. There could be a computer error, a typo, the cab could have broken down, she could be checking in right now as I speak, that I know that, but something inside of me tells me that she is in danger. We'll be dealing with Stone, and as most of you know, he is a formidable enemy. He seems to have zero sense of self-preservation. Stone will throw himself at you through a hail of bullets. He doesn't care. If he doesn't care about himself, you can imagine how little he cares about you. There are many times we have physically fought where the only thing keeping me alive is Stone having fun. He likes to fight, it's a game to him. He has many opportunities to shoot me, but he prefers to stab. Stone is the kind to play with his food. Will it just be Stone or will he have backup? One of the men raised his hand politely. He will most likely have friends with him. If you see a woman in a bright-colored dress, don't kill her. Even if she shoots at you, don't kill her. Find a way to subdue her peacefully. I'm assigning you two, Eric pointed at two of the Americans, to find this woman and, I don't know, tie her up to something. Keep her peaceful until after the fight. Stone has been abusing her for years and years. She'll most likely feel some sort of twisted sense of loyalty to him. Yes, sir, the two said in perfect time. The other 4 of you will have other jobs. 2 of you, he pointed at the last American and a Russian, will search for Nikita and protect her. She is about 5 foot, 90 to 100 pounds. 14 years old. Black. Little colorful streak in her hair. Looks like Jalisa because she is her little sister. The other 2 will be with me. We're going in the front. I want you all to blend in. We look like normal people, okay? Cover up your vests with jackets. Don't wear your weapon in plain sight. Yes, sir, they all called down the line. You have 3 more minutes to locate your jackets, hide your weapons, and pile in the car. Eric watched them all scurry away before slipping on a lumpy, unattractive jacket. He got into the car with a heavy sigh. In total, there were 8 of them. 6 men with him, a medic, and Eric himself. The air in the car was thick. No one spoke and no one dared to suggest they turn on the radio. Eric drove one car, with an identical one, driven by the medic, following behind him. Each move Eric made, the medic copied. Soon enough, they were pulling into the potholed parking lot of the Semia. The only cars in the parking lot that Eric could identify were Stone's shitty truck and Marie's BMW. There was one red 4-door that Eric thought belonged to a customer of Marie's, but Eric couldn't be sure. The Semia was not a booming business by any means, but it was still strangely quiet. Those assigned to locate Marie and Nikita go in through the employees' entrance. You 2 with me. We go in the front, Eric told them all after they had gathered round him. The men went on their way while Eric and his group paused in front of the bar. Eric pressed his face up to the glass on either side of the door. All the lights were off online except for the neon sign on top of the bar. Its pink light blinked into the darkness, but still illuminated nothing of note. Closed? Eric questioned. The bar closed when the last customer left. It didn't even keep government-regulated hours. He made a motion with his hand and one of his men tried to open the door. It jiggled uselessly over and over, no matter how hard the man pushed. I think it's chained, Eric grunted. The old lock on the heavy wooden door should have given way by now. We can break some glass or we can break the door. Which one will be easier? We don't exactly have a battering ram, but it would still be easier to break the door. Much less chance of injury. One of the men spoke in Russian, voicing everyone's thoughts. They lined up and started running into the door, ramming it with their bodies. Eric gritted his teeth. The sheer noise generated by them taking down the door alone was enough to alert anyone in the building. Flashes of light around the corner. Gunshots? Or something else? Eric aimed his gun at the glass beside of the door, startling the men mid-run. Several fell onto the pavement. I can't wait for this. Those may be gunshots. Eric crossed his arms over his face and pushed through the broken glass. It rained on the tile floor of the bar room and he was in. There was, in fact, no one there. It was almost eerily quiet until gunshot came from upstairs again. A woman screamed, too high-pitched to be Jalisa. Nikita. I'm going further in. You follow when you can. Eric barely glanced over his shoulder before running toward the upstairs steps. The employee entrance was busted open and the door swung uselessly on its loose hinges. Help! Another scream. It was definitely Nikita. Eric kicked in the thin, cheap door to the apartment upstairs before jumping back a few stairs. 4 more shots fired, all toward the door. Eric was smart enough to dodge them. Keeping his head down, he made a beeline to the couch. It was cover. A trail of bullets followed him. The stream paused, and then 2 different people were calling his name. Eric! Nikita and Marie both screamed in relief. Eric, there's these back off, asshole. Men trying to get to me. Help me! Marie continued. Where is Jalisa? Eric crouched down behind the couch. Standing in open doorways, their bodies shielded by corners, stood the 2 men that were tasked with taking down Marie. She's fine. Help me. Marie's voice echoed before another round of horribly aimed bullets went flying through the air. She was positioned in her room, the barrel of a gun sticking out of the door. This woman says she will kill the kid if we do not let her pass, one of Eric's men shouted at him. You threatened Nikita? Eric watched as Marie peeked around. Will you fucking help me? Shoot one of them for God's sake. Marie was getting on Eric's last nerve. Put down the gun. Eric took a big risk and started walking toward where Marie was holed up. She looked at him with wide, panicked eyes. Marie would have to decide to let him get close to her or to shoot the man who could be her ally. Why you don't come any closer? She pointed the barrel of the gun at him. Revolver. Most likely held 6 shots. She had used up the majority of them shooting blindly at nothing. A box of bullets beside her. There was a chance she reloaded, but probably not. I'm your friend. Eric set his gun down on the ground and held up his hands. Remember, Marie. You need your friends right now. I guess you're okay. Marie bit her lip. But why wouldn't you shoot those guys? They're trying to attack me. Marie. You really do need some sort of help. Eric sighed before crossing the 5 feet that separated them in a dive. His body crashed into Marie's and they stumbled backwards. Eric's men rushed in, all 4 of them securing their targets. Eric was right, Marie's gun had been empty. Do you know where Jalisa is? Eric had to yell to be heard over the sound of Marie kicking and thrashing her body about. She's getting fucked. She's got a client. Marie made a disgusting noise in the back of her throat and literally tried to spit on Eric. The gob of gooey spit landed on the floor in front of him. What? Eric was so angry he kicked the wall. You all protect your targets. Spinning on his heels, Eric ran back down the stairs. He knew the room Marie entertained her clients in was the first place to check. As he entered the main bar room floor, Stone was waiting for him. Stone sat at a table in the now illuminated bar, smoking a cigarette. Well, look who came to rescue his princess. Stone leaned back in the chair, the front legs lifting off of the tile floor. Where is she? Eric held his weapon at arm's length, locking one elbow. I don't have time for your shit, Stone. This isn't a game. Isn't it? I run, you chase. It's a nice little game of cat and mouse. I'm almost sorry to see it end, but everything does, I suppose. Stone leaned his weight forward, the legs of the chair coming back down with a smack that echoed through the empty space. I'm not playing your game. Eric glanced toward the door to where Jaleesa should be, only to find it open and presumably empty. You already are. Stone was haughty. He glanced over his shoulder, and 3 other men stepped out of the shadows. Stone had no real friends, and these men were not part of the mafia, so they must be hired guns. Eric took a step back, his jaw clenching. These were not good odds. He took another step back, intending to make a run for upstairs to get help. There was no sign of the 2 men who were supposed to be with him. Hopefully, they were still alive. Not one more step. This plays out my way. Stone laughed. Here are the rules. 1. You drop your gun onto the ground and kick it behind the bar. 2. You take off that ugly-ass jacket and your bulletproof vest. Those go on the floor, too. No need to kick those. 3. You and me, fists only. Winner walks out of here alive and gets to fuck Jaleesa. How do I know you'll play fair? Eric jerked his head in the direction of the backup Stone had called. You'll have 3 guns on your side the whole time. What if they just decide to rip me in half and call it a day? They'll get paid whether I'm alive or not. There's a key in my pocket that opens a little lockbox with their pay. If I'm alive, then I hand them the key. If I'm dead, then they can fish it out of my pants themselves. Stone stood up and placed all the weapons on his person on the table. He turned his pockets inside out and unbuttoned his shirt to show he truly meant fists only. All right. Eric set down his gun and kicked it behind the bar. He removed his lumpy jacket and his bulletproof vest next, leaving them in a heap in the entrance. He felt extremely naked as he walked out into the bar floor. The vulnerability of missing his weapon was getting to him. The 2 men circled around each other, each waiting for the other to make the first move. They locked eyes like predators in the jungle. Eric could still remember his father's advice from when he was a teenager, getting into his first fights: hit first and hit hard. Eric lunged forward, aiming for Stone's face. With a sound that could almost be described as a giggle, Stone moved out of the way, only taking the blow on his shoulder. He returned with his own strike, hitting Eric squarely in the jaw. It was gentle compared to what Stone could have done. He wasn't using his full strength, drawing this out for his own amusement. Eric rubbed his jaw as he backed up a bit. This would take longer than Eric thought. Why are you doing this? What the hell is wrong with you? Eric snarled. Why? It's a lot of fucking fun, Eric. Stone lashed out with an open palm, hitting Eric in the chest. While Stone was close, Eric reached around and grabbed his hair, holding him in place while he kneed his stomach over and over. Stone dropped hard. This wasn't a damn game, and Eric would not treat it like one. They exchanged blows back and forth in much the same manner until Stone got angry. Eric had gotten in one too many hits, and now that he was in pain, Stone was not happy. He reeled back and hit Eric in the face with all his might. The first thing Eric felt was cold. The chilly tile floor pressed against his face. Slobber from the hit dribbled out and pooled onto the tiled. Then the pain. It blossomed like a delicate flower all across his face. Hands pressed firmly to the floor, he pushed himself up. The unmistakable sound of a gun being loaded echoed behind him. Casting a glance over his shoulder, Eric saw the hulking form of Stone wielding a gun pointed right at him. With a cry, Eric scrambled forward on all fours. He drove towards the exit, fingers reaching out and grabbing his bulletproof vest just in time. Shielding his most vulnerable parts with it, he survived a bullet aimed at him rib cage. The vest shoved against him as the bullet drilled through the Kevlar fibers, leaving a dull pain but not an open wound. That wasn't supposed to happen. Stone roared. He turned to one of the men watching this unfold. Give me your gun, stupid asshole. Eric scrambled on all fours behind the bar, desperately moving towards his own weapon. Stone shot randomly at the bar, hitting the bottles on the shelves. Glass shards and burning alcohol rained down on Eric. He twisted his eyes shut to protect his vision. More glass and alcohol showering down upon him. Boots moving toward him. The cool metal of his gun in his hand at last. Carefully listening to the sound of Stone's heavy boots slowly moving toward him, he aimed in his mind. All he had to do was pop up and pull the trigger. Eric wiped his eyes with his shirt, trying hard to ignore the way they burned despite his efforts to prevent that. He raised above the bar and emptied his clip into the direction Stone's blurry form was in. The form shook for a moment before falling. Holy fuck, came the whisper from the two men watching. Is he dead? Eric called, still crouched behind the bar. He had no way of knowing for sure what Stone's instructions to these men were. Yeah, you got him all right, another voice sounded. The first man retched all over the floor as Eric stood up. He walked past the men, keeping his pace quick in opportunities for cover in the forefront of his mind. Washing his face and eyes in the bathroom, he reemerged to see just how much damage he had done. Brains were splattered in a grotesque red streak across one of the bar tables. Stone lay in a slowly expanding pool of his own blood. He lay face up so Eric could see that 3 bullets hit their mark, one in the arm, one in the stomach, and one right in the forehead. He wanted to celebrate his luck, but there was still the matter of finding Jaleesa and his 2 missing men. After ducking in every room and finding nothing, he called one of his missing men on his cell phone. He answered immediately and let Eric know that she was found hiding in the secret basement. The 2 men stayed with her there, confident in Eric's way to make his way out of the fight alive. He had many cuts from the bottles exploding and numerous bruises and aches, but he was, indeed, alive. The secret basement was stuffy and dusty, but it was full of corners and furniture and places to hide. Jaleesa was a smart girl to go there. Eric made his way to a certain crate and found it and the hatch to the basement already open. It was a quick descent down a ladder and he was already hearing Jaleesa. Eric! She threw her arms around him from behind before he even got off the ladder. It's over now, Jaleesa. Eric turned around and held her to his chest. It's over now.
Chapter 11. After their heated reunion, Jaleesa and Eric made their way upstairs. Only pausing for Jaleesa to change out of the lingerie Stone had forced her in, they met up with Nikita and Marie in Marie's room. The older woman was still struggling against the men Eric had assigned to protect her while Nikita was sitting cross-legged on the bed, clutching a teddy bear and rocking back and forth. Eric's men sat around, smoking cigarettes and drinking water, the typical calm-down ritual after a fight. Sister! Nikita cried, throwing the teddy bear against Marie's headboard. Jaleesa, now dressed in one of Eric's oversized t-shirts and a pair of denim shorts, climbed onto the soft bed and embraced her sister. Did anyone hurt you? Jaleesa asked. She pressed her hands to the sides of Nikita's face and looked deep into her eyes, trying to non-verbally communicate how important this was. No, no one hurt me. Nikita buried her face into her sister's shoulder, inhaling the scent that has comforted her since she was a child. I was so scared, though. A couple of times I was convinced that I would die. My chest felt like it was on fire and I couldn't stop shaking. I just had to keep praying and hoping I see you soon in heaven. You probably had a panic attack. Hopefully it will never happen again, but if it does, I want you to take several deep breaths and focus on things around the room. Look at the lamp, describe the shape and color out loud. Sometimes it helps to distract your brain like that, Jaleesa advised her sister. No matter what, remember that both the Lord and I are with you at all times. You will be protected. Guess it's over? What happened downstairs? Marie looked at Jalisa. All I know is that I was in that room waiting for the man to show up when there were big crashes outside. I got scared and hid under the bed for a bit until I heard gunshots coming from somewhere upstairs. I knew I had to get out and find Nikita. I made finding her my first priority. As I was climbing up the steps, some men I didn't recognize opened the door and were talking loudly about Marie. I dashed to that crate where the entrance to the basement is hidden and went inside, where I hid and began making plans to rescue Nikita from them. I crouched down in some spider-infested corner when the men came in after me. They found me and told me they were with Eric, and I had no choice but to believe them, Jalisa explained. She then turned to Marie. What's your side of the story? My side? Are we trying to assign blame here? Marie huffed. Very well. My side is that I was sitting here minding my own business when this shitstorm happened. I was in the middle of trying to distract Nikita by feeding her a snack and asking her to explain that video game she loves so much. I wasn't really paying attention, but she seemed happy enough. I wasn't happy. I was humoring you for my own good. I knew that my sister was downstairs about to be forced into sex work. I was planning on boring you to sleep, then going to rescue my sister. It was a 14-year-old's plan, naive and hopeful. Still, it touched Jalisa's heart that her sister would try to rescue her. Anyway, the door was locked, so these two assholes had to kick it in. I consider myself a very prepared person, so I grabbed my trusty long-barrel revolver and looked out. I didn't know the men out there, so I started shooting. They just shouted at me that they were there to protect me, which they were with Eric. I learned a long time ago not to trust men, so I didn't. Eric showed up. The men tackled me. Yada, yada, yada. Now we're here. It's not my fault. Marie pointed at Eric. It's Stone's fault. I agree, Nikita spoke up. I was only around him for a while, but he made my skin crawl. He told me that nothing bad was happening, and I told him that that was wrong. I said that bad things were happening to Jalisa and that men would hurt her. Did it happen to you? No. Eric saved me. Nothing bad happened to me. What else happened while I was gone? Jalisa asked. Nikita's side to the story wasn't vital, but it was healthy for her to get it out. I was eating the ramen noodles that Marie boiled for me, and I was talking about video games. There was a big crash, and then Marie told me to hand her the box under her bed, and she pulled out a gun, and I went into the corner. I covered my ears and prayed and rocked back and forth and thought for sure that I was going to be a goner. Nikita started crying again. This is Stone's fault. He should pay. No one is trying to assign blame. But if we were, I agree with you. The Stone's fault. He's a monster. Eric rubbed the back of his neck, the blood on his hands weighing him down. I guess my side of it is that I felt that Jalisa was in danger and I did what I had to do to protect her. Also, Stone died in the fight. We have a mess on our hands that needs to be taken care of quickly and quietly. Is anyone going to call the cops? Nikita asked. Listen to that. Marie cackled so hard she started screeching and put her hands on her stomach, as if she had to physically contain her laughter. No, baby. Jalisa pulled Nikita close. We can't call anyone. Everyone here would be in a lot of trouble. You and I are black women who don't have identification yet. Marie is a prostitute, and Eric is an immigrant. Are you even legal, Eric? I'm working on it. It's hard to get papers for the government that cover up mafia work, Eric admitted. Eric's an undocumented immigrant. The police are not on our side. None of ours. If we can handle it ourselves, we need to. Jalisa looked to Eric again. I assume your mafia connections can take care of this. Eric looked away from her and to his hired men. He spoke rapidly in Russian, giving them orders to contain the scene, fix the glass, dispose of the body, and clean up. The hired men departed at once, obeying Eric without hesitation. Now what do we do? Nikita asked. We need to get out of here. Let's go back to my place. I'll give the hotel room to Marie and she can stay there the night. Eric put a hand out and helped the girls off of the bed. After packing up their things and giving Marie the details of the hotel room, they were in Eric's car and speeding off toward home. Once they were in, Eric had one of the women he employed take Nikita into the kitchen to cook for her. At such a young age, seeing such violence. She needed a healthy meal high in natural fruit sugar and lean proteins. The woman began to make breakfast for dinner while another woman set up Nikita's video game. Jalisa headed upstairs. The stress of everything that had happened was getting to her. The one thing she needed right now was him and his love. She pulled him into the bedroom. "I need you," she whispered. "I don't know." Eric looked anywhere but at her. "With your mental state that I just don't want to take advantage of you." "I'm fine." "Are you sure? With everything that has happened? It might be wrong of me to make love to you." Eric brought one hand up and stroked her cheek. "That's for me to decide. I am a grown woman." Jalisa took his hand off of her cheek and pulled him toward the bed.
Oh no, it's about to get hot.
"But we can't put this on YouTube as they don't allow it." "I'm sorry."
But check the description of this video to join Romancely Audio Velvet and get the steamy scenes in future.
If you're already a member, the love scene reference is Her Russian Millionaire, Chapter 11, Love Scene 5.
Okay, back to the story.
"We should run away together." Eric pressed his lips into a thin line as she laughed at the idea. "I mean it. You and me. Nikita? She can come too?" Eric pushed himself closer to her. "Don't you want to get the hell out of here? Where would we go? What would we do?" Jalisa was already shaking her head. "I've been trying to get out of the mafia business for a while. When I told you my money was tied up in business stuff, I wasn't just making excuses. I've been starting legitimate online companies. It's been hard to turn a profit since it's so new, but we're breaking even. Only a little longer and we'll be good. I have enough money put back to support a move to England. It's where I was planning to go before I met you," Eric said. "England?" Jalisa exclaimed. "My goodness, that's so far away. Almost too far away." "England?" Eric nodded. "As for what we'll do there, I'll do business. Nikita will go to school and you can, too. If that's not what you want, you can pursue any career you could possibly think of. If you don't want that, I am fine with you being a housewife." "Housewife?" Jalisa hung on the wife part. Visions of her and Eric's kids danced in her mind. "If that's what you want," Eric repeated. "England will be a world of possibilities for us. I tell you what." Jalisa snuggled against him. "I'll think about it."
Chapter 12. This one? Eric pointed to the computer screen. Jalisa shook her head and passed him a pork egg roll dipped in duck sauce. Eric clicked the next arrow and bit into the egg roll. The sweet sauce dripped down his chin. "I kind of like that one." Jalisa pointed one chipped nail to the screen. With her hair no longer in twists, she started to chew on her nails to protect her natural curls. "Isn't it a little small, though?" Eric licked his fingers and scrolled down to read the specifications. The two were gathered around a desktop monitor at a hotel next to the airport they would depart from tomorrow. Chinese and pizza were the only thing that delivered there, and they had had pizza for lunch. Nikita lounged on the bed with the portable gaming system that Eric had picked up for her so she would have something to do during the flights. On the screen, real estate in England flashed by. Right now they were searching in London, so most of what showed up were flats or apartments. Jalisa was okay with almost anything, so long as the area it was in had a reasonable crime rate. Eric was much pickier, searching for the perfect house. Prices scrolled by at the top, reaching mind-boggling high amounts for anything with land. Right now they were looking at a modest 2-story with 3 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, and a garage. It didn't have much in the way of backyards, and it was attached to a line of homes that looked just like it, which Jalisa didn't like, but it was nice. Eric clicked on the next. An apartment on the top floor of a building. 2 beds and 1 bath. An open floor plan and a big kitchen. It wasn't an ideal home for the 3 children Jalisa wanted to raise, but it would work for a while. The next, a grand mansion with 5 spacious rooms, 3.5 baths, and hardwood floors. It was nestled in the heart of London and was outrageously expensive. Eric looked at that one a long time before deciding it would be noisy. I'm seeing a lot of old homes. Eric mumbled. I don't care what kind of home it is so long as it had enough space for all of us. Jaleesa didn't have anything against old homes. Old homes are more likely to need frequent repairs. Eric shook his head. I'd rather invest in something that will stand up for a while. Why? Jaleesa asked. It's not like this is permanent. Right? I'd like it to be. Eric turned to her, wiping off the bit of duck sauce on the corner of her lips with his thumb. How about let's just take it slow? Jaleesa was not about to commit to anything permanent without a ring on her finger. She didn't doubt that he intended to be with her for the long run, but intentions and doing something were two very different things. Slow? Eric's eyebrows went up. He turned to her, stopping only to admire the way her jeweled skin glowed in the blue light of the monitor for a moment before getting serious. I didn't think we were taking it slow. I don't know exactly what that means. Jaleesa pressed her lips together. Can we just speak plainly? Sure. Eric sighed. I just thought that we were more than boyfriend and girlfriend. I know we aren't married, but we are in a committed long-term relationship. We're not just high school kids visiting each other's lockers and making out in cars until someone catches us. I feel like we have a real, adult, committed relationship. Isn't that what you want? It is what I want, but I can't ever marry someone who can't or won't go to church with me. Religion is very important to me, it runs deeper than blood. It is a very integral part of me. If you don't love God, then you don't love all of me. I dream of taking our children to church. Us all sitting on a pew like ducklings in a row. Me, you, Nikita, our eldest daughter, our middle son, and our youngest daughter. Taking them to choir. Dressing up for Easter and Christmas. Praying before meals. I understand that you and Christ have a rocky past, and I don't mean to sound insensitive, but you need to not let your brother's death hold you back so much. I understand that his passing was brutal and violent and occurred right in front of you. God can help repair your heart, but you shut him out. Jaleesa stopped as she noticed Eric shaking his head. It's not just that, Jaleesa. I have been in therapy for my brother's death. I've moved on from that. He's not the one holding me back, I am. The things that I have done when I've worked in the mafia. It wasn't all drugs and illegal alcohol. It was murders. Organ harvesting. Protection racketeering. I hurt people for power and money. I don't think that God can ever forgive me for that. If I wasn't so scared of losing everything in this world, including you, I would just end my life and send myself to hell early. That's what I'm talking about. Jaleesa pinched the bridge of her nose. I can't be with someone who thinks he's going to hell, and even worse, accepts it. God will not forgive me, Eric began. God is merciful and will forgive those who truly repent, Jaleesa insisted. Can we continue looking at houses? I promise I will think about all you've said. Eric clicked to the next one. This one is cute, but it still has no land. Let's look outside of London. After all, England does not have to automatically equal London. The two flipped through houses, pointing out ones that looked nice or were near exciting city centers. Jaleesa made a list of restaurants she wanted to eat at and sites she wanted to see. She had never left the United States, so this was a real treat for her. The two saved a bunch of houses to a joint account before preparing for the rest of the trip. Eric had used his connections to get them all new papers much quicker than Marie's connection did. Jaleesa didn't even mind losing the $1,000. She was just happy to now be Trinity Talles, a woman who had zero business with the Department of Child Services and had no reason to be nervous when presenting her passport. "Nikita," Jaleesa called. "What's your name?" "Nikita if you're asking, Alice Talles if anyone else is asking." Nikita's eyes didn't even leave the screen of her portable gaming console. "Good, just making sure." Jaleesa nodded. She turned to Eric. "And you are Samuel Smith?" "Yup." Eric stretched his arms out in front of him before shutting off the monitor. For a moment, the only light was that of the moon and Nikita's flashing screen. Then Eric flipped on the television and relaxed against the bed. He pulled out his cell phone and punched in a number. "Marie?" he asked. "It's Eric." "Yeah. I know. Hear me out. I really think you should come with us to England. It's a chance at a whole new life for you. No one will know you, it's a completely fresh start." "How often do things like that happen?" "I've already paid for a fourth ticket and I'll hand you $1,000 to get you started." "No, that's not what I'm saying. Marie. I'm not saying you need my money." "Yes. Yes. I know that. I know how well those men pay. I know." "That's great. Come on. I'm just saying that it would be in your best interest." "I know. Okay. Listen, there will be a lot of new experiences in England, new food, new people. New shops. All kinds. I bet if you Google England shopping you'll find lots of I know." "Okay. I guess do you want to talk to me later?" "Okay. Bye." What happened? Jaleesa could figure out some of it from his side of the conversation, but not enough to feel comfortable drawing a conclusion. "She's given up on life and offended by my offer in general." Eric sighed. He put his phone on the hotel nightstand and held out his arms. Jaleesa snuggled into them while Nikita rolled her eyes on the bed next to them. It was a nice hotel room for not being pre-booked. Jaleesa was worried they wouldn't have any rooms available, but Eric flashed that winning smile of his to the woman at the front desk and they had a room. It was 2 beds, one for Eric and her and one for Nikita, with a bathroom, closet, television, and balcony. The city bustled outside of their window, a collection of lights and sounds. Every so often, a siren would go by. At least 10 sirens had gone by since they checked in. Jaleesa would be glad to get rid of Los Angeles. They finished up the night by watching made-for-television movies and cuddling. Jaleesa fell asleep feeling safe for the first time in forever. That night she dreamed of the future. She sat at a kitchen table, blue paint over wood, reading a magazine. The cool air smelled like honeysuckle. The kitchen window, slightly open to let in the honeysuckle breeze, sat above a gleaming silver sink inset into Eric's granite countertops. The stove beeped and she rose out of her chair. A pan of cookies waiting for the oven rested on the eye of the stove. She slid them into the oven and returned to her chair. In the living room, a bright pink and yellow open space, Eric listened to Christian music and talked on the phone with his mother. Occasionally, he would laugh out loud. The sounds of their children playing in the backyard filtered through to her ears. Nikita's voice, a little deeper with puberty, gave them instructions. 3 children, mixed to look perfectly like the 2 of them, listened intently and learned to play softball. The eldest daughter, Penelope, was 8. She had skin the color of western coneflowers and eyes just as bright and curious as Eric's except brown. The middle son, David, 7, was lighter, with a fawn-colored complexion and soft blue-brown eyes. The youngest girl, Faith, 6, was the spitting image of Jaleesa, umber jewel-toned skin and dark brown eyes. They ran around the yard in an imaginary ball field. Nikita had set up bricks and buckets for the bases. David hit the ball and went running. He tried to imitate what he had seen on television and attempted to slide into the brick base, resulting in a cut on his leg. Nikita and Penelope helped him inside while Faith ran ahead and told Jolisa. It was unnecessary, though, for his wails could be heard 2 houses over. Grover, the family dog, rose from his bed to see what the matter was. Eric exclaimed in Russian and also came to help. Jolisa took her son into the bathroom and stripped off his muddy pants. Eric held him and encouraged him to pet Grover to calm down. Jolisa pulled out their first aid kit and cleansed his wounds. The girls waited outside for news of their brother and nephew. It wasn't a large scratch, but it did bleed. David's fear of the blood was probably more why he was screaming than any pain. Jolisa rubbed Neosporin on the cut and bandaged it up with love. 5 minutes later, David was out playing with his sister and aunt again. Jolisa and Eric embraced and looked over their happy family. There was nothing more Jolisa could ask for. God must truly be working in her life if she was this happy. The cookies came out of the oven, baked to perfection. It was perfect. Until the alarm went off. The group rose and prepared for their early flight. Jolisa dared not tell Eric of her dream. She was worried that she was falling too deeply in love with a man who she could never have. She was determined to lead him to the Lord. Only then would she allow herself to fall fully in love with him and entertain the idea that her fantasy might one day become a reality. The 3 of them took advantage of the hotel's free breakfast buffet. They stuffed themselves on fruit, omelets, and waffles. Jolisa made sure to grab a couple motion sickness pills from the gift shop before checking out. She gave one to each one of them with a can of ginger ale. They took a cab to the airport since Eric had sold his car to one of his men after they checked in yesterday. "Can we see Big Ben?" Nikita asked. "I don't see why not." Eric smiled at her and she smiled back. Though Nikita was losing the few friends she had made in Los Angeles, she was quickly growing to like Eric. Saving her sister from being hurt scored him major points in her book. The airport was busy, even this early in the morning. The sun streamed through the giant glass walls and illuminated everything. Planes took off and landed outside. People bustled about, trying to get to their flights on time or trying to rent a car or grab a snack. The smell of pretzels and coffee and airport food hung in the air. Nikita paused next to the Cinnabon. "May we get a cinnamon bun?" she asked, fluttering her lashes at Eric, who she knew was most likely to say yes. "Sure." Eric reached in his back pocket and retrieved his leather wallet. He was about to pull out a crisp $20 bill when Jolisa stopped him. "You'll get a tummy ache if you eat that much sugar." Jolisa raised her eyebrows. "I won't. I'm 14, not 5. Nikita gave Jolisa such pitiful eyes that she relented. Jolisa removed her hand from Eric's wrist and allowed him to give the money to Nikita. She skipped off to the Cinnabon, money in hand. "We'll eat some of it so she doesn't throw up on the plane," Eric whispered in her ear. "Good idea." Jolisa laughed. "We'll have mostly healthy food for our children in England, though." "Children?" Eric wrapped his arm around her and bent his head down to nibble at her ear. "When do you want to start trying for those?" Jolisa turned her head to give him better access to her neck. "When does the plane land?" "Cheeky," Eric growled. "In all honesty, I don't really feel comfortable trying for children until after we are married." "You do still see marriage somewhere in our future, correct?" Jolisa asked. "Yes, somewhere in the future." Eric smiled like he had a secret. After the 3 had enjoyed a Cinnabon, they waited for their plane to be called. Eric sat next to Jaleesa while Nikita was next to an outlet, keeping her gamepad plugged in to negate the battery life she was spending right now. "What would you do if I asked you to marry me right now?" Eric stretched an arm around her. "What would you do if I asked you to come to church with me?" she fired back. "What would you do if I said that I thought about what we talked about last night and I have decided to get right with the Lord?" Eric kept on phrasing his sentences like a question to match hers. "What would you do if I said that I doubted your seriousness?" Getting right with the Lord is not just a decision that you make. You need to pray. You need to talk to Jesus and confess your sins and ask him for his divine forgiveness. Jaleesa looked at him. "What if I told you I was working on that? I prayed with you at breakfast, did I not?" Eric took her hands in his. "I want to be a good Christian and a good husband and man. I want to live my life next to you and be with you every step of the way." "Are you sure?" Jaleesa asked. "I am." Eric squeezed her hands in his, a solid grip that was meant to show her how serious he was. It was then that Eric did it. It wasn't like in the movies. Eric didn't make a spectacle out of her, he knew she would not want that. Instead, he simply reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. Passing it to her, he waited for her to open it to reveal what they both knew would be inside. Jaleesa's mouth opened and closed several times before she finally made sound. "How long have you been planning this?" she asked. "Is that a yes?" He crossed his fingers and laughed. "It's been since before you rescued me?" "Or after," she continued on. "Is that a yes?" Eric grabbed her hand and held up the box in her hand, trying to draw her attention back to the most pressing issue. "Open it." "Oh!" she gasped as she flicked the box open. Inside was a ring with a princess-cut diamond set in a silver band. All along the edges sat tiny red rubies that continued all along the band. The inscription on the inside read J.P. "Jaleesa Petrov?" she asked. "Yes. We won't have those names on any legal documents, but we will both know in our hearts that we are Mr. and Mrs. Petrov." "Yes," she cheered. "Of course." The two embraced over and over, kissing and hugging until Nikita came over. "You two need to calm down with public displays of affection before we get politely asked to leave because of a complaint by an elderly white couple." Nikita put her hand on her hip. "What's going on anyway?" "Look!" Jaleesa squealed and showed her what was in the box. "Oh, my goodness!" Nikita placed a hand to her chest, but her surprise was false. "You consulted her, didn't you?" Jaleesa turned to Eric. "I might have." Eric had the decency to look a little sheepish. "He did." Nikita laughed. They chatted amongst themselves, discussing wedding plans, until it came over the scratchy intercom that it was time to board. The three got on the plane and never looked back. Their honeymoon took them to Japan, where they stayed for a week. They landed in Tokyo and took a bullet train to Osaka. Each day they visited another prefecture, slowly working their way back up to Tokyo, where they would depart back to England. Though it was untraditional, Nikita came with them. She had nowhere else to go and could not stay a week in England by herself. One of the biggest attractions was food, of course. They skipped the fancy, rich people restaurants in favor of real Japanese street food. Jaleesa recorded Eric and Nikita sampling various dishes that they had never had before to see their reaction. Some of the time it was great, but other times Nikita looked like a baby who had just been fed a lemon for the first time. They visited shrines and hot springs and participated in a tea ceremony. Jaleesa snapped photos of her two favorite people enjoying everything Japan had to offer. They spoke in broken Japanese to each other and learned lots of new words. The best part was the monkey park, where Japanese monkeys played with the group. The two newlyweds slept in a hotel room right next to Nikita's. At first, Jaleesa was very concerned about being in a strange place and not having Nikita by her side, but Eric comforted her through it. They made over and over and over, holding nothing back and expressing all their love with their bodies. "I love you." Jaleesa's hands drifted up above her. "I love you, too." Eric smiled down at her. "You are perfection and I am so lucky to have you." Jaleesa felt tears prickle in her eyes. "I feel the same way about you. I thank God every time your heart beats. You are so important to me. I have no idea what would have happened if I had not met you." Eric kissed her palm and the tip of each one of her fingers. "Don't think about that." Jaleesa's voice broke. "I mean it," Eric whispered. "You are my everything. My sun and my moon. God has made me for you and you for me. We are together by His grace. He is good at all times. At all times He is good." She smiled. "I never want this to end." "It doesn't have to," she vowed. She meant it with every fiber in her being. This never had to end. And it didn't. The end.
If you want more BWWM romances like this, please, my love, be sure to subscribe to the Romancely YouTube channel. I look forward to spending more time with you. Subscribe and let's make it happen.